On this episode of the DTVC podcast, Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews is on, and we're going to be talking about the canon classic Invasion USA, so stay tuned for that. And then, we do start the episode talking about Marvel because it kind of worked out the same as the last time he was on. So when he was on in February, and when he talked about Death by Temptation, it was the week before Brave New World was coming out. It was essentially the Tuesday before it was releasing, and then the episode aired the Tuesday after. So it's like the movie came out in between them. Same thing happened with Thunderbolts. We recorded the Tuesday before Thunderbolts came out. Thunderbolts came out this past weekend, and of course now I'm airing the episode now. So we had a conversation about the state of Marvel. So the first hour or so is that conversation about Marvel, kind of where things are. One of the interesting things is we were both kind of like not sure what Thunderbolts was going to be like. I saw it this past weekend and really enjoyed it. So stay tuned for more on that in a second. But stay tuned for that episode there. After our cold open here, we'll have Freddie Young on. We'll be talking again Marvel, State of Marvel, and then Invasion USA, the canon movie classic. And then next week we've got Ty from Comeuppance on. We're going to be looking at two movies from Zumo. We'll be looking at Taken from Rio Bravo, a Nevsky film with Wilson and Rothrock putting in a small roles, also Matthias Hughes. I keep wanting to call it Taken at Rio Bravo, but it's Taken from Rio Bravo, I believe. I could have that wrong. It still could be Taken at, but I think it's Taken from. So that's the one movie we talk about. The other one is 12 to Midnight, Robert Bronzi movie that also stars Tito Ortiz. And so with Robert Bronzi in this movie, they're not just biting on the fact that he looks like Charles Bronson, but they're also making the movie title sound like a Bronson title, right? So instead of 10 to Midnight, it's 12 to Midnight. So that'll be next week on the podcast here. And then in terms of DTVC Extra, speaking of Thunderbolts, because I really did enjoy that one. I'm looking to maybe do a short solo episode this week on that. So maybe Thursday, something like that. Just a quick, give my thoughts on it, what I liked, all that kind of thing. Overall, I did enjoy that movie. It's a fun one. And for the most part, people have been pretty consistent on that. When I look at my letterbox, for the most part, 3s and 4s. There's a possibility you won't like it, but my hunch is I think you will. So definitely check it out. Again, it's not. I don't know if I'd put it like as a top tier Marvel one, but it's good. And Florence Pugh is really good. She does a really great job with it. So we'll keep an eye out for that. All that to say, on maybe Thursday, Friday-ish, I'm going to try my best to see if I can get a solo episode. It won't be as long as the usual ones. Because I don't have as much history with the Thunderbolts as I did. Like, remember Deadpool and Wolverine when I did that one? It was I think it was an hour and a half. I was able to talk on that one movie, but it was a lot of history talking about Deadpool and my experience with Deadpool. I don't really have any of that kind of history with any of the characters in this, so it'll be kind of just a fun, talking about the movie and that kind of thing. So keep an eye out for that. Again, I usually don't do social for the solo pods, the DTVC extra pods. So as long as you're subscribed, you'll get the episode. And I will say, actually, the Daredevil Born Again one did really well. People really liked that one. So maybe more of those kind of one-off short ones are things that maybe people want to hear about, that kind of thing. So I was thinking about doing a video for Thunderbolts to talk about that. Kind of maybe post a reel on Instagram or something like that. But I'm still not really good at that kind of thing yet, so we'll see. If I was less self-conscious, I'd do a walk and talk, which I think would be very interesting for people to have me doing a walk and talk while I'm down here in South Philly, because you just hear all kinds of swearing and yelling and all that stuff while I've got my camera held up, and I'm talking into it. So it could be an interesting thing, but again, I kind of feel self-conscious doing that. I think I'm too not a millennial, right? Not a Gen Xer. And when I say millennial, probably more like a late millennial, right? Is the earlier ones, but the late, sorry, not Gen X or Gen Z, right? Gen X, the late millennial, Gen Z, they're kind of okay just talking on their phone all the time while people are watching them, and they don't care. I would be self-conscious about that. So all that to say, you get a solo pod. That's what I feel most comfortable doing. Is just having a mic in front of me with no camera on, just talking. That's kind of, as you can totally tell from this here, right? So anyway, while I'm rambling here, why don't we get on to the site, the blog. This past weekend, we did Darkness of Man, which again, that was a podcast episode I did with Sean Malloy from I Must Break This Podcast. It was episode 194. So you can check out that podcast episode as well. But finally got the post on the site because, we got a Van Damme tag, we get a Cynthia Rothrock tag. Also, an Eric Roberts tag. I totally forgot that he has one shot in the movie where he's getting a taco from a taco stand. But trip of a movie. Anyway, so that's the most recent one. I've been meaning I need to get Baby in the Basket up soon. So usually what I've been doing, the way my cadence has worked is that I do regular sort of just, movies that I just find and want to review on weekends. And then on Tuesdays, I've been saving the screener posts, but I just have not been getting around to writing those screener posts on Tuesday. So, we'll see. We'll see if I can, because I really need to review Baby in the Basket. I'm starting to get other screener requests coming in. So I'm getting a little of a backlog there. So I've got to get us caught up here and get those screener requests in, because I always appreciate those screener requests. I like that when people come to me, especially when they come to me personally and they say, hey, I'm the director, writer, actor in the movie, whatever it is, producer, and they say, hey, can you do a review on our movie there. I always appreciate that and want to do that. So I just got to get caught up on that. So I may do Baby in the Basket this week. And the other movie that I had was Invasion Force, the AIP classic that I did in a podcast episode a couple months ago with Chris Kavinsky from Bulletproof Action, which was a really fun one there too. So that was our what was that? It was our second most recent. So the most recent episode I did with Chris was Martial Law 2 was the one we did. I almost said Martial Outlaw. Martial Law 2, which is my most recent one with Chris. But then I think it was in like December we did Invasion Force. So that's another really fun episode. So if you haven't checked that one out, you can check that one out as well. But that might be the review that I do this week. And that's what my plan was to do. So we'll see what happens. Again, just keep an eye on the space and always check out the letterbox and check out Facebook and all those things. And I'll kind of keep everybody posted as best that I can. And then in terms of guest spots, I was on the PM podcast recently. We talked about A Dangerous Place. Absolute fun episode. Check that one out. If you're not subscribed to the PM podcast, you really should. I also think, I'd love it if you rated and reviewed my podcast, but definitely that PM one. The more we can throw support behind that PM podcast, the more that John is going to be able to do things with it, get more interviews, all of that kind of thing. I know people are talking about, I can't wait to, for him to talk to Don the Dragon Wilson, all those kinds of things. If we get the more visibility on that podcast, people like Don the Dragon Wilson are going to be more willing to want to get on the show. They're going to make it more of a priority to get on and do an interview with John. He's already got great interviews so far, right? He got Joseph Merhi. He got Spiro Rosados, right? The episode that I was on recently, A Dangerous Place, he interviewed Art Camacho. And that is an absolutely fantastic interview that he does with Art Camacho. Art Camacho, you see on his Instagram, he seems like the nicest, most gracious guy ever. And he comes off, he definitely, he is that in the interview for sure. And so, but he really gets into the process of how he started with PM. And it's kind of what you think it is, right? That he was just like, Joseph Merri's like, hey, do you want to direct a movie? And he's like, yeah, I do. I want to, I'll take any opportunity you give me and I'll run with it. And that's what he did. But, he talked about even talked about movies like Ruthless, which Ty and I, we covered. We weren't as big of fans of, unfortunately. But I will say, that movie was #1 on Hulu, and so really good for Art Camacho that he would have a movie be #1 on Hulu. But he talked about the process of training Dermot Mulrooney to do his own stunts in that movie. So, yeah, check that one out. check out all the episodes. One of the things that's great about that PM podcast is that all the episodes are fantastic, and you can kind of pick up and whenever and listen to them. But definitely, it's one of those things. We've wanted a podcast like that for years, right? I know we wanted some PM podcasts. We wanted something that really covers PM movies. John is doing it now, and he's really, he really wants to take this thing and run with it. Go on to whatever your podcatcher is and just give it a quick line like, hey, I love this podcast, 5 stars. That's the kind of thing that's going to help him, be able to get more people on the podcast, more guests, be able to do more things with imaging, all that kind of stuff. So definitely support it. But check out the most recent episode because it was really fun. We had a really fun conversation talking about A Dangerous Place. And again, Art Camacho, really fantastic interview. All right, somehow 8.5 minutes went by really quickly. So before we jump into the podcast episode, my newest book, Nadia and Aiden, is available on Kindle Unlimited, and paperback. Check out the link in the podcast description. Pick that up today. Buy that. Supporting the site, it's the easiest way you can support my site, especially if, writing and reviewing. I love it if you write and review on the podcast, but that takes some work, right? You got to go in, you got to say, I like this podcast. It takes some typing. You got to click the 5-star. That takes some work. Whereas buying my book, you just click buy on Amazon and they'll ship it to you as long as you get a credit card set up, right? You got to have a payment method set up, but once you get that set, they'll send it to you. So it's probably easier to buy my book than writing a review on the podcast. So it's a great way to support the site, low energy, low effort. And I always appreciate it, right? It's you don't know what it's like unless you're someone who also has, movies, books, or whatever out there that you're trying to sell, right? When you go in and you see you've got a new sale, it just makes the whole day a lot brighter. So you can make my day a lot brighter just by buying Nadia and Aiden or any of my books. I would always appreciate that. Well, all right. Before I go much further here, because we're closing in on 10 minutes, why don't we have John Cross from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures playing our theme song, and then when we come back, Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews is on. We'll be talking Marvel, and we'll be talking about Invasion USA. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I'm joined once again by Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews. Welcome back, Freddie.
It's good to be back, man. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, doing good. Good to have you back. And yeah, you got to hear the Jitsi opening for the first time. So.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Sky, for leaving us.
I know. Good old Microsoft. You can always trust Microsoft to be Microsoft. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, the other thing that's weird is that the last time you were on, we were recording about a week before Brave New World came out. This episode, we're about 2 weeks out, I think, from Thunderbolts, but when this episode is released, it'll probably be a week out. So it's kind of interesting that we seem to be doing episodes right around the time of Marvel movies coming out.
Well, actually, Thunderbolts is pretty much in a couple of days, actually. So, right this very week it comes out.
It is this weekend. Okay. For some reason, why was I thinking? Oh, the 3rd okay. For some reason, I was thinking it was like the 8th. So actually, so it's actually exactly the way it happened before. When we recorded it, the movie came out, and then the episode came out after.
Right.
Yeah, that's a trip. So yeah, now I never got around to seeing Brave New World, but I did watch Daredevil Born Again. I did see all of those episodes, but I'd heard kind of mixed reviews on Brave New World.
It's a fine movie. That's as much positive I can give it. It feels mostly like pretty much a streaming Disney Plus movie.
Yeah.
It's okay. I think some people actually liked it more than I did, but I mean, for what it is, it's what you expect from it. It's pretty much like a sequel to the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show. Special effects are not the greatest, but they're not bad. The story is pretty much like TV level storytelling. You could tell it felt rushed. You could tell it felt like they reshot most of the movie. There was times where things didn't really totally flow together or make sense. I don't blame the acting. I don't think the acting was the best part of the movie. But I'm not surprised it didn't do as well as they probably thought it would. I even said it on this podcast the last time. It wasn't gonna really do well. I don't even think it broke even in terms of what they expected of it. So I don't know if we're gonna get a sequel. This movie does introduce a new trilogy. I don't know if we're gonna get that, but I mean, it's a fine movie. I suggest it when it hits Disney Plus, you watch it. But is it the best Captain America? No, it's pretty much the worst one, but it's fine for what it is.
Yeah. So that's my thing. I've got to watch Falcon and Winter Soldier, so that's why I didn't go see it in the theater.
You have to watch that for this.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting because I wonder, because Thunderbolts was supposed to be a TV series, and then they decided to make it into a movie. Is that also probably going to be kind of a sequel to Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Well, from what I heard, it's pretty much Black Widow 2. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because Florence Pugh is pretty much the main character.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's one of the things I still feel is like the biggest mistake of the sort of the Infinity Saga of the MCU was killing off Black Widow. even if Scarlett Johansson, even if they knew like she was going to want to do her one movie and then she was kind of done with Marvel, killing that character off, it just didn't seem like it was a smart play. And so now they're kind of they kind of hamstrung themselves. Obviously I know Scarlett Johansson sued them because they released Black Widow on Disney Plus at the same time, and she hadn't agreed to that because she was supposed to get some of the gate. But I always feel like that was such a mistake, and so now it's like, yeah, they kind of put themselves in the situation where they had to use Florence Pugh as their new Black Widow, which I guess in a way that kind of works because that's what they're doing with Captain America too. But I don't know.
I'm not sure if she wanted to leave or they killed her off. I'm not really sure. I think there was supposed to be a different version of that scene with someone else dying. I believe it was supposed to be Captain America, honestly, or something like that. But yeah, it's weird how she didn't really get her fair shake because I think she was supposed to be the first female-led superhero film, and then Wonder Woman kind of swooped in there and took that spot. Yeah, Black Widow is not the greatest movie either, unfortunately. I love Florence Pugh. I think Yelena is a great character. She like you saw her in that movie and Hawkeye also. She's great.
Yeah.
And Scarlett Johansson does produce Thunderbolts, though. She does have a producing credit, so she is making money off of this movie in some way. And I think she said she's never coming back to do Marvel. So unless she's lying and she's gonna be in Secret Wars, I don't know.
Right.
But like Chris Evans, I'm never gonna do anything, and who knows.
Right.
But yeah, it's Marvel's in a weird state right now. I don't know how Thunderbolts is gonna do. You would think it's the first summer movie; it will do very well, but Sinners right now is pretty much taking the box office by storm. And I feel like that's going to take a chunk out of that audience, especially when Thunderbolts doesn't really have like a black character in it, to be honest. So I don't know how it's going to do. They were in a weird spot. I still have not seen Daredevil yet. Even though I heard it's really great. But yeah, I don't know how this movie's going to do. I feel like it's going to do as well as Captain America: Brave New World, to be honest with you. They're in a tough spot.
Yeah, because what you're saying right there is that Sinners is going to cut into Thunderbolts. Like, can you imagine like pre-pandemic, like 2018, 2019, the idea of a Marvel movie having to worry about another movie cutting into their gate, right? It's usually the other way around, right? Like we would think like, oh, like, Fox, you shouldn't be putting out X-Men Apocalypse,
Right.
3 weeks after Civil War, and now it's the other way around. Because I think that also did probably hurt Brave New World. I was trying to think what was in the theater. I guess actually I don't know. They were kind of the first movie of the year, weren't they? They were Wicked and some of the other ones had already kind of made their way through the system, so it wasn't quite the same. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I feel like the box office in general has not been great until really like Sinners, and Minecraft also. Which was also this month. Yeah, I don't. Maybe there is superhero fatigue. Maybe people are just tired of watching comic book movies. Like I said, also I feel like the country, the mentality of the country right now has shifted, and I feel like maybe having a black Captain America is not for everyone. That's the nicest way I could say it. So maybe that's a part of it. And also, I feel like maybe a lot of people did not watch the TV show because I read a lot of people that were like, "Oh, this is a sequel to a Disney Plus show." No one realized that. So I think that's also a problem that people don't want to do their homework on these movies. That's why I feel like Fantastic Four will do very well because it's a brand new thing. So like Thunderbolts, you have to watch Black Widow, you have to watch Falcon Winter Soldier, you have to watch Hawkeye,
Right.
and you have to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah.
So like all these different things to watch this one movie is like that's a lot for people.
Yeah. Right, because that's the thing. The thing that made the first few phases of the MCU, especially the first two, I'd say the first two phases in particular, what made them so great was that you had these characters that each got their own movies, and then you brought them together in a way that hadn't really been done before. But you could watch Avengers and then go back and watch the other movies. Like Avengers could almost sell it kind of worked in both ways, right? Like you could follow it and watch each of the movies and then watch Avengers, or you could go see Avengers and go back and watch all the other movies and be like, oh, okay, here's the essentially the origin stories and that kind of thing. But it was only 6 movies, right? It was 5 with the lead up to the final one. When you get to the third phase of that the Infinity Saga, where it was like 11 movies, and you had like a 2-parter. They had reached their apex there. They'd done like probably the best they were going to do, and then they thought, oh, you know what, we could do this even better with the Disney Plus shows. And they never quite understood, I think, how much that, like you said, it overwhelmed people, that there was just so much that you had to watch for things.
Yeah, and I think that's why a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 did so well, because it's just those 3 films, and plus the special, the Christmas special, and then you have the Infinity War and Endgame. That's all you gotta watch.
Yeah.
It's not a whole lot. And I also think like the characters were have more development than the characters in Thunderbolts do. Like maybe people know Yelena, and Bucky, but like Red Guardian, Ghost, and these are characters that like were like side players.
Right.
So it's kind of like a tough sell to really go, oh, okay, I'm gonna watch this movie, but I have to watch all these other movies and these TV shows to kind of get a sense of who these people are. That's and a lot of people don't have that time. People are working or going to school or just doing other things. Period. I mean, it's a lot to ask of an audience. So that's why I feel like something like Fantastic Four, which doesn't have any kind of ties to anything else, is going to do very well. And I think a Superman will do very well because it's a brand new thing as well. I feel like these films that are tied to other things are going to be dragged down because it's like, oh, now I got to watch this to watch this. No one has time for that.
Yeah. You wonder almost, and you can't fault Marvel for doing what they did with the kind of this multiverse thing, and they've had huge successes. I shouldn't say, because I mean they've the Spider-Man No Way Home, the Doctor Strange movie, obviously just this last summer with Deadpool and Wolverine.
Right.
Yeah. So they've had some big hits, but you wonder if maybe that was the time to reboot everything, right? It's like, okay, we've just had this big Infinity War thing. We've finished this whole thing off. Now let's restart everything. But I think the other thing too that kind of hurt them was how well WandaVision did. Because it was almost like, oh, we could just keep making stuff and it's going to be, and I think Falcon and Winter Soldier, you saw it start to tip of it, but even Loki, right? Loki was so huge. I mean, I always joke that like there's like every third millennial has a cat named Loki, right? Or a dog named Loki. And
right.
So it's like, so they were really still cooking along that. And I guess, I don't know, the pandemic, but I think even without the pandemic, things were going to start to tip to this point where we're at here because, like you said, there's just too much now that you have to know to go into these movies. And that wasn't the way it was in the comic books. It's like, or even like when you're watching a cartoon, it's like if you were watching a Spider-Man cartoon and Magneto was, showed up to fight Spider-Man, you didn't have to know Magneto's backstory, when you're watching the cartoon as a kid, or, if you're reading the comics and it was like, I remember the first, I was talking about when I did my Born Again solo podcast episode, how the first time I ever saw Daredevil was an issue where he and Ghost Rider were on the cover, and I was like, oh, these two guys look awesome. And you just pick up the comic, and I don't need to know. I mean, I think back then they would put like the origin story on the first page a lot of times for characters.
Or they would have the description of the character.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But beyond that, you didn't have to. There wasn't a lot of, like you said, you didn't have to do homework. In a way, it was kind of the other way around. That the new comics sold the old comics, and then you'd want to go to like the flea market or wherever, or use comic book posters or whatever, and sift through the boxes to find the old stuff. And yeah, it's almost like they've got to find a way, because again, that's what Deadpool and Wolverine did. It, instead of being like something where you had to know all this backstory, it instead it sold those old movies, or it made people want to go back. I mean, when I went and saw Blade in the theater in October, there were a lot of younger people there for that movie, and I think part of that was because of Deadpool and Wolverine. And yeah, so it's like somehow they got to do it the opposite way around, right? That you've got to want that Brave New World. You watch Brave New World so that it makes you want to go back and watch all that other stuff, as opposed to you've got to watch all that stuff before it, and you feel like you're going to miss things if you don't.
Yeah, I feel like they got into this mess where instead of making every franchise its own little pocket universe, everything is too connected. So now you got like, everything's a crossover now. So you got to watch this to watch this to watch
Right.
that, and I think that's what the comics used to do that in the '90s, and it's like you know that pretty much destroyed the comic industry too back then because it was like so much stuff like X-Men crossovers every year, Spider-Man crossovers. You have all these big events. It's a lot for people to spend on.
Well, that's a great point you make about the comics because yeah, Marvel at that time, right? They were always looking for any excuse they could to put out like a $5 reverse hologram cover. But you're right, like you had the major crossovers, like I mean, that's where the whole Infinity thing comes from. That's where Kevin Feige got the whole idea, right? Was the Infinity Gauntlet, then Infinity War, and so you had those like the kind of the big book crossovers, but like you said, Chris Claremont, he had all these different X books that, and then they all became their own X books later, or like X Force and whatever. Yeah, they would always do a big crossover thing every year as well, and it was cool at first, right? Because you're like, oh, I get to see Cable interacting with Wolverine and all this stuff, and it seemed really cool at first. But you're right, like eventually, it's like when these comics get so expensive, nobody could afford to pay for it.
Right. So I feel like that's also an issue here because now you gotta pay Disney Plus, you gotta pay for movie tickets,
Yeah,
you gotta bring people to the theater. That's food. It's a lot of money.
yeah,
So yeah, it's they're the also I feel like the announcement of Doomsday kind of ruined it too
yeah.
because now everybody's just expecting wanting to see that because of Robert Downey Jr. and what's gonna be done with that. So it's like you took the thunder out of everything before that. So now it's like okay, why do we need to watch this when we just watch that next year?
Yeah. Well,
Because
yeah,
that's going to change everything supposedly. So why bother with this stuff?
right. Well, because if you think about it, when you would, when was the earlier phases where they didn't have Disney Plus, you'd have to find the movies in a lot of different places. Like Netflix would sometimes have them, cable companies would have them, but a lot of times you'd have to rent them to be able to watch them. And now with Disney Plus, I think that also removes a lot of the impetus to get to the theater. Like, for me, for example, with No Way Home, I was like, or I'm sorry, with Brave New World, I was like, well, you know, I'm not going to be able to watch Falcon and Winter Soldier in time, which I think that would have been a good thing to do is if they had made it so you wouldn't have to watch those. Because the other thing too, right, is it's also a kind of half sequel to the second movie in the whole Marvel franchise, right? The Incredible Hulk
Incredible
movie.
Hulk, right?
Yeah. And so between those two things, it's like, yeah, you just think, well, at some point I'll catch up with all of it. Right. And then, and I'll get there. And I think especially for younger people the ones that were like really driving the MCU back in the 2010s, who were born in like the late 80s, early 90s, who were in their 20s at that time. Now they're in their 30s. They have kids of their own. For them, I think that the whole Disney Plus thing works way better. They can just, when the kids go to sleep, they can fire up Disney Plus and watch the movie that way. Also a lot of them have really nice TVs. So it's like, what movie is the one that you need the theatrical experience for? I think it's like older people, like people, especially like our age, but even older. Cause like I'm a rarity, I think, for our age cohort. Cause I almost never go to the theater. Cause I usually talk with people who like yourself who go, a few times a month, once a week, something like that. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the things. I think younger people, they just, they don't, they didn't grow up with the feel of the movie theater being the same thing. And
Right.
they didn't grow up with a bad home theater experience, I should say. And so for them, it's like it's got to be a really good thing to get them out to the theater. And the other thing too, I think is that the attention span thing. I think younger people don't have the attention spans that especially I think post pandemic, a lot of people's attention spans have gotten shorter. So it's like it's a lot easier to watch something on Disney Plus and pause it and get up and make popcorn and stuff like that than to sit in the theater. And I saw Nosferatu, people were getting up like every 10 or 15 minutes. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, that's a big issue. Streaming has changed the way we view things.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I don't know how this movie's gonna do. And it's a shame because I've heard nothing but good things about this movie, but they might not see it as a priority.
Right.
It's not like a Wicked or like something like a Minecraft
Yeah.
or something like that. Or Sinners, which is a fantastic movie. It's the best movie of the year so
Yeah.
far.
I might have to
So
check that one out. I mean,
yeah,
Wicked, the other thing about Wicked, when you think about it, is that for those, younger millennials that were kind of the real drivers of the success for the MCU, for them, a Wicked is perfect because they're, the kids that they had during the pandemic, they're like 4 and 5 now. They're like prime age for something like that. Or if they had kids, kind of just before the pandemic, same thing. 5, 6 years old. They're kind of perfect for that age group. So that's another area. I mean, Wicked kind of, you wouldn't necessarily take a kid to some of the Marvel movies because they're more, they're PG-13, but Wicked was kind of perfect for that. It's a little bit older than say like a Pixar movie, but yeah, and that was kind of a big hit for Universal. They haven't had a big one in a while, other than the Fast and Furious movie. So for them to get something that wasn't a Fast and Furious movie was huge for them.
Yeah, and they're playing it smart. They also kind of messed up Disney with Snow White because they put Wicked on Peacock
Yeah.
that same weekend.
Yeah.
And Snow White just bombed. So
Right,
that's
exactly. Well, the other thing too about those movies, I know there's a lot on the Snow White thing. There's a lot of kind of a lot of racist things that were going on about it and things like that. But I think there isn't the market for these live action versions of the cartoons. I think that there's something about the cartoons that people, they grew up with the cartoons. They're the ones that as a kid. I mean, I remember as a kid, when it was like the Friday before vacations or whatever, that our teachers would play those movies, and the live action ones, it's a cool concept to do the live action versions, but I don't know if, I think that was another era where they were kind of sort of trying to tap into millennial who were young during the late 80s, early 90s for some of those ones like Beauty and the Beast. And I don't know, it doesn't quite resonate the same, I guess, for me. I don't know. And I can see why people don't see them as like kind of appointment viewing the way they would see something like Wicked.
yeah. I don't know why did he try making these live action films. For every Lion King, you have like Snow White. I also think like the actors kind of upset the audience with their political stance and stuff like that, so that
Yeah.
didn't help. And that's also a thing. Like politics have kind of bled into entertainment.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like I don't know how the movie audience watches movies these days. I don't know. Like Sinners, I never thought it'd be this big of a hit. So like, and you go, like, what do these people actually want to watch? I don't know.
Well,
So
yeah.
like Snow White, it's like Snow White. I expected a bomb.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
hated it from the start.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, because like you think something like Wicked, like when I saw the ads for Wicked, because on Comcast, like if your TV went into the screensaver mode, it was all Wicked. I mean, they were just all
mhm.
Wicked ads everywhere, and I was like, I don't know that I see that doing really well. I don't know how that's going to be, but no, families went in particular. I mean, there are definitely adults that liked it as well. But it resonated with a lot of people. I think it was one of those ones that had rewatchability, which is a rare thing we see in the theater now, because now it's like going to the movies is like an event thing. It's like, I'm going to go for this 2.5 hour Marvel movie, and I'm not going to go see that movie again in the theater. This is the one time I'm going to see it. That's it. But Wicked, I think it had a lot of rewatches, which is rare for movies nowadays.
That had a lot going for it because you have a great cast, you have an IP that people knew. It was a
Mhm.
Broadway show, theatrical play. People probably did it in high school.
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz still a very big intellectual property. Um, the music, people love the music, and just the way they promoted it. They promoted the hell out of that movie. Like
Yeah.
every time I was at the theater, it was always a Wicked trailer.
Right.
Um, so you could not escape that. You knew it was going to be a big event. It was colorful. It was bright. The songs were good. Ariana Grande fans probably went on TikTok and say, "You got to watch this." So like it had a lot going for it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's sort of the new reality. I think people, everybody uses that term Barbenheimer to talk about that, the
Hmm.
Barbie and Oppenheimer year, and I think people thought, well, all right, Deadpool and Wolverine and a Pixar movie are the top two movies last year. Everything's reset. We're back to normal, and I don't know that that's necessarily what it was. I think it's just it probably had that the Barbie and Oppenheimer thing. Probably, Sinners is probably another example. That Wicked's another example of that. That actually did that. What there was a cultural shift there. It's just that the there wasn't a lot out for kids movies last year. I don't think. I mean, I guess there were some, but that the Pixar movie I think came at the right time. It came.
Inside
Yeah,
Out too.
right. Exactly. Yeah, Inside Out too. I think. I mean, it came actually right at the time that all the entertainment magazines were writing the death of theater.
Right.
Articles, and then suddenly, Inside Out 2 comes out. But, Deadpool and Wolverine, it was, I think in a way, I was looking at it myself and thinking, like, okay, well, Kevin Feige's back, Marvel's back. They're ready to do some big things now. Things are going to start to change and they're going to really start to hit it. But I think that was more of a one-off where they were tapping into the kind of the same things that Spider-Man Far From Home or sorry, No Way Home was tapping into. And I think these, I don't know how to explain it, but it was more of a one-off than it was a return to form. And I think, maybe that's what it should have looked like. That the whole Barbie Oppenheimer reality is probably more of a new reality than we thought. That Marvel's kind of that wave is probably crested, and now it's just a matter of maybe if they reset their expectations and they start saying, okay, we're going to make some $80 million, $100 million movies that make 400 or 500 million in the theater, and maybe we'll build up to like one Avengers movie that we can hope will make $1 billion. But I don't see them doing that, right? They're always going to try to shoot for those big numbers.
That's the issue. I think it's the budgets that are really killing them. I think they're just like overblowing. Like $300 million budgets is a lot to ask for. Like Doomsday, I think Doomsday's gonna be like $300 million.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So it's like, do you expect to break even with this movie just because you're paying Robert Downey Jr. probably a quarter of that money?
Right.
But I feel like that's the way to go. Lower budgets, you'll get a bigger profit. That's why horror movies do so well.
Right.
Even if they don't like succeed all the way, like he's still making something out of it. So they have to reset and figure out what they want to do. And I also feel like people just want to see different characters at this point. I think X-Men, I think that's what people are waiting for, is our X-Men. That's what it is. And I think Fantastic Four is going to do well because it's a different kind of property. So
Yeah.
I just think people saw Endgame as the end, and it was like, okay, this is whatever.
Yeah, because you make a great point because the X-Men characters, the X characters, it's like we got them last year in Deadpool and Wolverine, and then it's like, okay, when are they coming back? I think people saw it and they're like, okay, great, you're going to put them in now, so you're going to start putting them in movies and stuff. And it's like, no, we're going back to these other characters now that are kind of tangential and not really the big ones. I mean, I think the other thing too that I sometimes forget is that Iron Man and Captain America were also kind of tangential characters when Kevin Feige got them, and the stuff that he did, that crew in general, Feige, Jon Favreau, that everybody, the Russo brothers, everybody that was involved with making those movies, they did some stuff with Captain America and Iron Man. But while they did some things that were new and hadn't really been done with comic books before, I think the thing people forget is that they didn't make a huge amount of money right away. They were more like critical successes that built buzz. And then it was when Avengers came out and that one pulled over $1 billion, that was like, oh wow, Marvel's suddenly here. The Marvel Studios, they've suddenly arrived, and it was kind of a new thing, and everybody else was scrambling to catch up. DC and everybody. But it's. I think they thought they could just always do it. That you just turn it on and do it, and you could just make big stars out of any characters. And I think they didn't really. I don't know if they realized exactly what they did. I think like Captain Marvel, they tried to do what they did with Captain America by doing a period piece and doing it in the 90s. But that first Avenger, that Captain America First Avenger, was a really special movie. The way they did that. I think if you went to Disney today and said, "Oh, I'm going to set my Captain America movie in the 1940s," they'd be like, "No, you're not doing that. We're not going to let you make that movie." But it worked. It worked, but it worked critically, right? It didn't work financially. It wasn't like one of their biggest hits. It's not until Civil War that Captain America really makes that kind of money. But so I think that's the other thing too, right? Is that they just think, okay, if we put $250 million in a movie, it'll make $1 billion or $750 million or whatever it makes. And it's a tough margin to try to to have to make every time.
I think they overestimated the fan base.
Yeah,
and that was the issue. People just want different things, and you gotta imagine the people who watched it back then were probably little kids. They're probably like adults, young adults now, and they're probably interested in different things. They want to see more adult content at this point. So
Well,
I
and
don't,
the
I
other
don't,
thing,
I
oh,
don't
go
know.
ahead.
I don't know like how they can fix it. To be honest, I think they need a break.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I think you're right. I think a break. I think TV show. It's like a movie here or there, but TV shows. But I think with the movies again, not needing to make $1 billion every time. Because that's the thing. Brave New World. No matter how good that was, it wasn't going to make $1 billion, right? It
Right,
wasn't
right.
that kind of movie. But to your point too about like the fan base, I think the other thing is there aren't many fans who read the comics like we did. Kevin Feige did. I mean I think he was born in like 77 maybe 76 77. I mean he's picking storylines from the 80s and 90s that that we're fans of and we recognize it, resonates with us. But I think for those younger millennials that are the ones that really propped up everything, I don't think a lot of them were comic book fans. I think they were more fans of the Marvel movies, and maybe they went to comic books after, they bought action figures and things like that after. But I think it's almost like what made those movies so successful is it sort of transcended comics. It became something more than comics. But the problem is that by doing that, you start to get deeper into Marvel's characters. You start using up some of the ones there. I mean, Ghost Rider, for example, like you said, you talk about horror movies. I mean, you could make. I mean, the second Ghost Rider movie was made for like I think like 50 or 60 million, something like that. And you could make a Ghost Rider that's kind of more of along the lines of like a horror movie that doesn't have the massive budget that probably would do pretty well. I think those fans that are now older, they would resonate with something like a Ghost Rider. I think they liked what was going on with Daredevil. So maybe that's where they've got to start looking.
I think also the problem is they're using characters that made their debut like the last 10 to 15 years.
Right.
So a lot of
Yeah.
the older fans don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
So that's another issue where they're using these storylines from like the last 10 years, and people are like, okay, what is this?
Right.
So that's a problem. Is so I think they skew too young
Yeah.
in terms of the characters.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's it.
like a Falcon didn't become Captain America until like 2015, something like that.
Right. That's
So,
right.
it's kind of like I didn't know he was Captain America. Always thought like Bucky would be Captain America. No, he was Captain America first, but then they made him Falcon. And it's like, oh, this big convoluted history. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna wait to his streaming. I'll just check it out.
Yeah.
So
No, that's a great point too. Yeah, because like certain characters like Jessica Jones, she came out after I was done
mhm,
collecting. Now,
yeah,
granted, those shows I liked watching. I watched the two of the three seasons of the Netflix show, but the problem with Netflix shows is that they feel like 13-hour movies the way that Netflix would make their shows. Which one of the things I like about I think you'll appreciate more about Daredevil Born Again. It's not completely episodic. I mean, it is still kind of a mini series type thing, but at least the episodes aren't as long. They're more like 45 minutes or so.
mm.
So it's a little bit easier to take them. But that by the time I got to the third season of Jessica Jones and watching all the other Netflix shows, I was just tired out. So that's the only one I haven't seen yet. But she was a cool enough character that even though she came out after I collected, but yeah, it's like a lot of them like Shang-Chi I'd never heard of before, and it looks like a good enough movie, but it's like, yeah, is that going to get me to the theater necessarily? So yeah, I know what you mean there.
But surprisingly, that made money,
Right, that's a good point. Yeah,
and that could have been because it was an Asian character. That's something that they had never done before. It could have been that
right,
was probably what it was. It was a fresh take on a superhero.
yeah,
So like Black Panther, that was a cultural thing.
right,
So and that's I think that's the issue where I feel like they're doing like the same movie over and over again. Like
yeah,
Thunderbolts, is it just Avengers with a B team?
right, right.
You
Or
know what I
Suicide
mean?
Squad.
Right. It's like so. It's like okay, do I need to watch this? From what I heard, like the end credits, the post credits scene leads into Doomsday,
Right,
so you have to watch
right,
the movie,
yeah,
or you can just watch it online, I guess, on YouTube when someone leaks it. Um,
right.
but that's another issue too. I think that the leaks have ruined the superhero movie.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point too, because the leaks, right? That's something that you didn't have before. I mean, what's the Simpsons joke where which I'm going to be spoiling Empire Strikes Back for anybody if you haven't
Oh,
seen Empire Strikes Back,
right.
but right where Homer leaves the movie theater and he's like, "Wow, can you believe that Darth Vader is Luke's father?" And everybody's in line waiting to go see the movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you've got that guy, but he's on Twitter and or X or Blue Sky or YouTube or whatever now posting that stuff. So everybody's a Homer Simpson leaving the Empire Strikes Back movie. So yeah, that's another aspect of it. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I don't know if I'll make it to Thunderbolts because I've got to catch up. I've been meaning to catch up on this. Like I did Born Again because even with Born Again I was like kind of up and down with getting episodes in, and so and it's definitely an easier watch for sure. And it's interesting, I think, because that, Disney has allowed them to be dark with that and say, okay, we're going to do something here. There are a couple of Easter eggs here and there for, for the greater MCU fans that I think is more of like a way of them saying Daredevil's in the greater MCU now. Cause those Netflix shows, it was almost like Hell's Kitchen was its own thing.
Right.
It was like there was no blip or people dying or any of that kind of stuff, right? It was almost like I think what they said was that the first Daredevil season was phase 2 when they made it into the canon, something like that. But yeah, it's definitely I think it's definitely a winner for them, and so yeah, but I guess that's the thing too this year, with the way things have stacked up with the strikes and all of that stuff. This just kind of ended up also being a year where you wouldn't probably want Thunderbolts and Brave New World to be your two movies, right? You'd probably want Fantastic Four to be your movie, and then maybe you have one of those in addition to it, or something like that. That's the other thing too, I guess, is they're kind of starting off with movies that kind of along that Ant-Man level where you shouldn't be expecting them to make a lot of money.
Yeah, that's the problem. I feel like they really need a big blockbuster movie like Deadpool. And I feel like all that's coming out next year. Like Doomsday comes out next year, I believe. Spider-Man 4 comes out next year. I think those are 2 things that people are waiting for. Yeah. Those are characters that people know. Yeah. So they're in a bind. And with Star Wars also kind of flopping. Well, they're Star Wars because the Revenge of the Sith did very well this weekend that we're recording this. They need to do something. Disney's in trouble. Because I feel like Warner Brothers and Universal are kind of gaining back on them.
Yeah, and you never would have thought that, right? Like again, we're talking about the fact that Sinners is going to cut into Thunderbolt's box office, and it's kind of 2 things, right? Like the idea that a movie like Sinners would be cutting into any Disney box office, but then on the other hand, the fact that Disney's pinning their hopes on a summer blockbuster on Thunderbolts as kind of being like an early summer, blockbuster. So it's like those 2 things together. I know Rob Liefeld. I saw that he was on X saying that Kevin Feige, needs to come off the mound. They need a relief pitcher in that he's done. Now, granted, Liefeld was mad because he wanted the Superman, like the Schuster, kind of the credit that they get, in Superman. He wanted that kind of credit for Deadpool Wolverine, like the, big, created by Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza. He wanted that same kind of thing, and Disney was like, "No, we're not doing that." So then I guess they kicked him out of the rap party because they were annoyed at him, and so now he's got beef with them. So it seems like Rob Liefeld hasn't changed from back when when you watch that Image documentary when they show him like poaching like Mark Silvestri's artists and stuff like that, and all the stuff that was going on there. It seems like he hasn't changed, but I don't know that it's Kevin Feige that needs to take a seat though. I think it's more like he's just got to go back to the drawing board. And, maybe that's what Doomsday is. Maybe that's the whole thing is they're going back to the drawing board. Maybe they just wanted to get these other projects out because they've got them and they didn't want to go 3 years without anything. I don't know.
Something has to change. Yeah. I don't think it's him, but I think they just need a break. I think that's what it is. I think they just need to reset. If that's what Secret Wars is, then great. Yeah. But I think they need to just maybe take a break for 2 years and then come back with X-Men or something like that.
Yeah.
Because right now they're not really selling Marvel the way it should be sold.
Well, and X-Men too, the thing with X-Men, they spent years when Disney bought Marvel, they spent years trying to diminish the X-Men in the comics and make the Avengers more prominent because they didn't want to do any solids to Fox. And so now they've got to kind of build that back up again. I mean, obviously Wolverine is still huge and Deadpool is still huge. But yeah, they've got to kind of, the rest of them. I mean, Storm is somebody who, Fox kind of dropped the ball with her. Halle Berry was great as Storm, but they never really used her well in the movies. I think Days of Future Past, they do okay with her, but for the most part, they don't use her as well as they should have. Storm is a big character that you could build a lot on. I don't think, you would, yes, you would have people saying, oh, you're being woke or whatever, but I think Storm is a natural, lead for them. Gambit, Rogue, those are characters. I mean, if you had like a Gambit and Rogue miniseries, that would be pretty amazing, I think. Those are all characters that they aren't even touching right now that, they have the rights to. They've had the rights to them since 2019, and they haven't been doing anything with them. And Chris Claremont kind of that's like you think about that, like the characters that he's created that they haven't used, that are all just sitting there. We're in we saw last year they're worth billions of dollars just sitting there, that not doing anything with them.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. I think that people just want to watch something new.
Yeah,
and like the X-Men '97 cartoon did very well.
Yeah.
So people want to watch more of that. Like, oh, okay, this is what society needs to see right now. And instead of giving us, second Black Widow and Winter Soldier and Ghost and Red Guardian, like characters that no one really cares about, to be honest with you.
Right.
Honestly, I feel like they should have switched Thunderbolts with Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four should come out this weekend.
Yeah.
I think that should have been the big opening for the summer, because that would have done very well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Fantastic Four is another property that, yes, Fox didn't do great with that one, but they're known characters. They're kind of easy. I mean, and they're granted for us older fans, we know them better because they were more prominent. In the 80s and 90s. I mean, there's another one that Disney diminished from a comic standpoint because they didn't want to do Fox any favors. But yeah, I think, and you're right too. They're a new thing. I mean, but just thinking, I was talking about. I mean, can you imagine if in Brave New World, instead of trying to make a sequel to the Incredible Hulk movie, what if they had said, oh, we're going to just sneak Gambit in here, and I don't know who would play him, because I don't know if it would be Channing, it wouldn't be Channing Tatum, it would be somebody else, because Channing Tatum's kind of his own thing there. But if they just snuck somebody like that in that movie, the buzz around that would have just been so immense that, or even if they advertised it, like, oh, who is this guy that he's fighting? Oh, that looks like Gambit. That's crazy, that movie would have probably done another $200 or $300 million just by throwing a character like that in there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Red Hulk didn't really sell people on it.
Yeah,
it's just another Hulk. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, She-Hulk didn't really leave a good taste in people's mouths. So now we have a Red Hulk. Oh, okay. I think that's why like something like a Black Panther, Wakanda Forever did very well, because one, the Chadwick Boseman thing, how they're going to handle that.
Yeah.
Plus, you introduced Namor, which a lot of people were waiting for, and I think that was a big selling point. So like Black Panther 3, which they're currently making, or they're about to make anyway. Like I feel like Storm should be introduced in that.
Yes, that would be so perfect, right? That's like the perfect thing to do there, and then have her own movie after. I mean, yeah, that would be amazing.
Right.
I mean, it's like with the Marvels. I think Captain Marvel. I think Disney misunderstood the success of that. Black Panther's success was because it was a next level movie. It was just. It's one of my favorites from the MCU. Mm-hmm. Whereas Captain Marvel, I really like Captain Marvel, but it wasn't $1 billion earner because of the movie. It was $1 billion earner because it came between the two Infinity War movies.
Correct.
I mean, that's the only Venom movie that comes out at that time that makes like what, 850. It's like the best of the Spider-Verse. I mean, the Ant-Man movie made like almost 700 million. So it's like there was a huge bump at that time. I mean, that's the only $1 billion earner for DC's extended universe, right? Was the Aquaman movie that came out.
Aquaman, yeah.
So I think they thought, oh, okay, we've got our next, like maybe like Iron Man or Captain America and Captain Marvel, right? So I think they thought Chadwick Boseman could be one, and Captain Marvel, Brie Larson could be the other. That would be their, what they pin their hopes on for the next phase of this kind of stuff. I think they overestimated how much people liked Captain Marvel. I mean, she's barely in. She's not in the first Infinity War movie. She just shows up in the second one, but she's barely in that one too. I mean, I liked her. I think she's cool in Endgame, but they didn't do enough. And then suddenly here we go. Here's a movie that she's in with Ms. Marvel and Monica Rambeau, right?
Monica Rambeau, yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I think, you know, they, again, it was one of those things where they just thought, okay, we're just going to roll them out and make all this money. And yeah, they're not at a place where they can do that anymore.
Yeah, I think they like I said, they overestimated the audience.
Yeah.
And yeah, I sometimes I think like, how do they fix this? Like, because it's just like they were such a high,
Yeah.
and now they're kind of like struggling to even make a profit at
Yeah.
this point. Because even Daredevil, from what I've seen, the ratings aren't as good as they wanted it to be.
Right.
Because I think Agatha had better ratings,
Yeah.
which is surprising.
Yeah.
Um, so
I mean, I wonder, again, just going back to Agatha versus Daredevil, I wonder if people thought they had to go back and if you hadn't seen the Netflix.
I think that's another thing. You're right, because
Yeah.
they made a canon, right, to the Netflix
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's weird because it's canon, but it isn't, in the sense that like it's canon, but the characters, they bring the characters back, but they don't. It's not like there's a lot of stuff that like you know that Daredevil and Kingpin have history, but they do it. I will say they do it the way we were talking about, where you can watch Born Again without having watched the Netflix series, and it can make you want to go back and watch the Netflix series. But again, they don't sell it that way. They don't say they should advertise that more. Like, I think the Marvels, for example, they should have said, you don't have to watch Ms. Marvel to get this movie. You don't have to watch WandaVision to get this movie. You probably should watch the first Captain Marvel movie because this is a sequel, you know, so you should at least watch the
right,
part one, you know, if you're going to watch part two. But you don't need to watch those series. Yes, you get a fuller understanding of the characters, but go back and watch them after. If you like the movie, go back and watch it, you know, subscribe to Disney Plus and watch the movies after. I think they could have done the same thing with Born Again. They could say, you don't need to watch all of those. You know, it helps. It's nice to watch them, but you know, it's kind of just like picking up the comic book at issue 100 as opposed to issue one. You can go back and check out the back issues if you want after.
yeah. I think I think a lot of it's marketing too.
Yeah.
I think they just, like I said, they're taking advantage of the audience,
Hmm.
thinking, oh, okay, I'm just gonna watch all of this because I'm a big fan, but
Yeah.
just because I'm a big fan of Marvel doesn't mean I want to watch every single character in the
Right.
universe. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. Right. Because
So
that's not
yeah,
what
go
we
ahead.
did. Right. That's not what we did. You know, you look who's on the cover and it's like, oh, that guy's cool. All right, I want to see him. You know, in this issue.
Right. Like when I collected comic books, I didn't collect every single like Marvel comic book. I was a big X-Men guy. I was a big Spider-Man guy. I love Captain America, so I will collect that. I wasn't the biggest Avengers guy at the time, so like Incredible Hulk I would collect. Yeah, I mean, I would go like independent who who's on the cover. Sometimes I like the creative team. I will buy a cover for that. So it's like people are picky.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta give them their characters, or they're not gonna care. Um, that's why I think Captain America: Brave New World didn't do that well because people don't connect Falcon to being Captain America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People still think of Chris Evans as Captain America
Right. Right. Yeah.
because he made that character so much of him.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's a tough thing. And also, I think the transition could have been handled better.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Like a TV show, fine, but I mean, not many people watch the TV show, and you should
Yeah.
remind people, hey, check this out before this movie comes out. And then you also got to watch Incredible Hulk now because there's a Red Hulk in there, and
Right. Right.
the Thunderbolt Ross is one of the characters in it. And it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
the leader is the villain.
Right.
Like it's like who like people like who? Oh yeah, that one guy in the Incredible Hulk at the end that kind of turns
Right.
green. So it's like, yeah, it's a lot. It's a
Right.
lot.
It seemed like they're doing a lot to try to get around the fact that Universal owns the distribution rights to Hulk. So they're like making a Hulk movie without calling it a Hulk movie. It's like they're essentially making Incredible Hulk 2 without making Incredible Hulk 2,
Mm-hmm.
is a way to get around Universal because, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, again, that's why Namor, right? It's why we haven't seen a Namor movie either because Universal owns the rights to him. What's weird, they own the distribution rights, but they don't own the like character right. Like they can't just make their own movies either. Like I think it's like they have to do it together because I was joking that it would be awesome if like put the Incredible Hulk in the Fantastic, or say, the Fast and Furious movies. Like if they if they had the rights to Hulk, they could, or Namor, like having Dominic Toretto fighting the Hulk, but I don't think that's how it works. I think it's like Marvel can make the movies, but Universal has to distribute them, and then I guess there's the whole thing about the Universal theme parks because they have Marvel characters,
Right.
so that's like a whole thing, and so. Yeah, it's all this stuff. So they, instead of making which again I haven't seen the movie, so I can't really comment. But it feels like instead of making an Anthony Mackie movie, they tried to make a backdoor sequel to Incredible Hulk.
You're exactly right. That's exactly
yeah,
how it feels like. Yeah.
yeah. So in that sense, like we were talking, there's characters that they could have. I mean, wouldn't that have been a kind of a funny way to bring in Blade? Just like Anthony Mackie is just, I don't know, that might be too much to have vampires have, like in Anthony Mackie's Captain America movie. But yeah, there's other things they could. I mean, the Sidewinder character, I heard that was a little bit different from the one in the comic books, but
It's very different. I think they should have just done Captain America and Winter Soldier movie
mm-hmm.
with Sebastian Stan. Like I think that would have brought people in. Like people love Sebastian Stan.
Yeah,
But he's in the Thunderbolts, and from what I hear, he's barely in that movie. So it's like, okay, well,
yeah.
like it's like, what's the point?
Right.
But he's also in Doomsday, so it's like they're both in Doomsday. So it's like kind of like, okay, well,
Yeah.
like where are we going with this? Namor's also in Doomsday, so it's like,
Yeah,
and I think he has to be used because Fantastic Four, he's a big part of that.
right,
With
right.
Sue Storm, so it's like, it's like I kind of see where they're going with things. It's just getting there, and it's just they're taking these steps where it's like, okay, we just gotta put these movies out because we need to know we have stockholders we gotta please and we gotta make this money, and it's tough. The business is tough.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they kind of the series were good. I think like She-Hulk could have actually been a really good roadmap for a good for a good approach to the series because She-Hulk kind of felt like Monk or Psych in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like She-Hulk could have been her own thing, like just making like these comedic kind of half-hour episodes that involve superheroes and stuff. And they could do multiple seasons of it. They could just keep making that show and bring in heroes sometimes. Like again, like Daredevil when he shows up in She-Hulk, it's just there. None of that stuff is brought up in Born Again. It's not doesn't affect anything else. It's just like, oh, he's guest starring as Daredevil on the She-Hulk show, and they kind of hook up and stuff like that. It's like that's something that could be a thing where it's She-Hulk is its own thing. People who enjoy She-Hulk, I mean, because I don't know how many fans Monk had. It was a popular show on USA Network, right? Or Psych was popular
Right.
on USA Network. I mean, it doesn't need to be groundbreaking every time. It can just be something that people enjoy getting a kick out of. And just okay, I'm just going to watch this and get a kick. I mean, granted, it was kind of creepy the way they did it, where they had instead of doing like a big version of Tatiana Maslany, they put her face on somebody else. That was
Right.
kind of creepy, but otherwise the show was funny. So I don't know.
I just think I think politics got in the way of that too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
that's the thing. That's the thing. You gotta. It's like I say. Like I don't know what the audience wants these
Yeah.
days. I don't know because if you're supposedly too woke or not woke enough, it affects the audience.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's why I think you just got to make your movie. Like Black Panther, for example. Whether anybody calls that woke or not, it's just a good movie. It's just
Right. Yeah.
they just made it. They just hit it out of the park. And sometimes it's just what you got to do. And I think that's the other thing that hurts Brave New World, right? So they didn't hit it out of the park. It was like reshoots and all kinds of other stuff that was going on there with that movie. So that doesn't help it either.
Yeah. It's and it doesn't feel special. It doesn't feel like you need to see this movie.
No.
And that's the problem. Like I feel bad for Anthony Mackie because I think he earned that role,
Yeah.
but I don't think people see him as Captain America.
No, it's a shame because I watched Civil War recently, with him, and I mean he's fantastic in that movie, and so you watch that and go, okay, well he definitely could be Captain America, right? When when
Mm-hmm.
Chris Evans is done with the series. He could do it, but yeah, you got to give him the material, and I think you got to put
Yeah.
the characters in there. You got to add in. I think that's the other thing is I think imagine if Deadpool just showed up and I always think about with the first Deadpool movie where Fox said you can't have Hugh Jackman. You can't add Wolverine because it's going to cost us another $10 million, and we don't want to add $10 million to the budget. It's like, you add that $10 million to the budget, I imagine that movie would have been close to $1 billion, as an earner. It was over 700 million for the budget that it had. You tack on another 10 million and throw in Wolverine, I think, another 300 million's worth of tickets would have been sold, get people in there. Adding these characters like this, that's what made it, like you're talking about, it's what made us buy the comics. I remember, I bought that Daredevil comic because it had Ghost Rider on the cover. I remember that there was it Nomad was the one, right? That was Bucky.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just about ready to wrap his series. I remember towards the end of that run, there was an issue that had Deadpool in it. Back when Deadpool was like kind of, X-Force had like 1 or 2 issues out. He'd just been, had his first appearance not long before that. But everybody wanted Deadpool, right? You wanted to see Deadpool in anything. He was the coolest character. I bought that comic book. I wouldn't have bought Nomad. I had no reason to buy Nomad. I didn't care. Again, that's why the book was ending. They were getting rid of it because nobody was buying it. But you put Deadpool on the cover, and it's like, oh, I want to see Deadpool fight Nomad. Yeah, I want to see Deadpool in anything, And I think that's the other thing, right? Red Hulk. If it had been Red Hulk on that cover, I wouldn't have been buying it. I wasn't looking at picking up for Red Hulk.
Yeah, and I feel like the characters that he associated with previously are not in the movie.
Right.
Like Hawkeye, Ant-Man,
Yeah.
who else? Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, the first Black Widow. So those characters that you kind of needed that kind of foundation to kind of build him back up as this new Captain America, and he didn't have that. He just thrust right into it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you have to watch the TV show to understand why he's Captain America. Not 6 episodes. Right. That's maybe 5 hours maybe to watch. And it's kind of like, why isn't like Bucky with him? Why isn't this happening? Who's the new Falcon?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think it can kind of go either way, but there's a sense too. I think that like when you look at comic book series, kind of before and after, that in a way, what Marvel was able to pull off with that the first 3 phases of the MCU, where there's only I don't even know if you would call like Incredible Hulk a dud, but they don't really have any losses. They don't really have any movies that really fall flat. To have that many. I mean, what was that? It was
23, I think.
Yeah, 23 movies. To have that many movies, a run of that many movies in a row, where all of them make some kind of money, and they're all they either do well critically or financially, or in some cases both. Maybe that's the as the kids would say, that's the unicorn, right? And that's the thing that is the thing that doesn't happen. And the more common situation is like what happens with the DC extended universe, or with the Sony Spider-Verse, or Fox with the X-Men movies, or Fantastic Four, or whatever it was that they had, that what Feige and company were able to pull off with those 23 movies. That's the rare feat, and maybe even they had to learn, are having to learn it now, that it's harder to pull this off.
Yeah, and I think they just looked out. I think it was the right time to do that, like the perfect time, like the right place, right time. It's like I hope they can try to do it again, but I think Endgame was pretty much like the peak. I don't think it's gonna get better than that. Also, I feel like these 2 phases have suffered because hasn't really been like an over a villain to tie everything together, like Thanos was. Like they had Kang, but that totally blew up in their face. Right. So now they gotta go to Doom, and he hasn't been introduced yet. So that's kind of like, like Brave New World is like its own little thing. It's not connected to anything.
Yeah.
It's not a multiverse movie. It's nothing. So it's like, what's the point of watching this?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't relate to anything else.
Yeah, and it was like they always would have those buttoners, right? That like, okay,
right.
But especially the first 2 phases, 5 movies and an Avengers movie. I guess the second phase was 4 movies, Avengers, and then Ant-Man. But then you kind of also have Civil War, which is almost like a second Avengers movie. And not having those Avengers movies, not having those big crossovers, I think has also hurt them. But I guess, yeah, because like Shang-Chi, for example, like they do a movie with him, like you said, it was successful. But then that's it, right? We don't see him anymore. And it's like, well, why aren't we doing like Shang-Chi with, I mean, Iron Fist. I know that Iron Fist series wasn't popular with Netflix, but that would be kind of a cool thing to just be like, okay, we're going to do the next movie. We're going to bring an Iron Fist in and they're going to fight, or, Wong, right? Wong was really funny in She-Hulk. That would have been a funny character to bring into a second Shang-Chi movie. But
Right.
like, we don't even know if they're going to do another Shang-Chi movie. That seems like they did the one movie and that's it.
They're already announced another one. They're doing it.
Oh, okay.
He's in Doomsday also. So
Mm,
they were supposed to do a Ten Rings show for Disney Plus, but then they canceled it.
right.
The sister who I guess took over the Ten Rings at
That's
the end of the movie. So I guess that's not happening. So it's kind of that's another thing. Like you have these teasers for things that's going to happen, and they don't do it.
right. Yeah.
So like what like that, I was waiting for that TV show. I was like, okay, well, if you're not doing this, what was the point?
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, because I think that was the other thing too is they had all these things in the hopper, and then
Mm-hmm.
Eternals went bad.
Right.
The Marvels went bad, and then there was the writer's strike, and they were just like, okay, we're going to just stop everything. I mean, they completely overhauled the Daredevil TV show.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's the other piece of it, and so now it almost kind of feels like if a place is like getting ready to like a company is like putting out a new wrapper like Doritos, they got a new bag style, and so they're getting rid of the old bags and
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of selling them off cheap, or like you can get them at like the dollar store or something like that while they're replacing with the new ones. It's almost like these movies like Thunderbolts and Brave New World, unfortunately they feel like movies that they just, okay, we made them back at a different time, let's just get them out there and see what they do. But at the same token, they expect them to make a good amount of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the issue that like the content that they're creating, like they have Wonder Man coming out. Like, does anyone
Right.
really care about Wonder Man at this
Right.
point?
Right.
I mean, White Vision, I'm waiting for Vision
Yeah.
Quest, but that's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah.
What they did to Scarlet Witch at the end of Multiverse of Madness, like, is she really dead? And you bring her back?
Yeah.
Because I think she was the reason why that movie was so successful to begin with.
Right. Right.
Um, so it's kind of like you have Agatha where they kind of tease her, but they never really show her. So it's kind of like I think that's what that show did so well because people were expecting Elizabeth Olsen to show up,
Yeah.
and she never did. So it's they I think they need to figure it out. I feel like I think they're just buying their time until Doomsday and be like, okay, let's just release this stuff.
Yeah.
Let it whatever happens.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we'll put all our eggs into Doomsday, Secret War, Spider-Man 4, Black Panther 3, and then after that we'll just reboot or whatever, and X-Men, Fantastic Four, Blade, if we could get to that.
Right.
If that's ever going to come out.
Right.
And we'll see what happens, I guess. Deadpool, he already said he's not going to do any of the crossovers, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be, it's a fascinating thing to think. Like, I mean, granted, 2019 was 6 years ago, but
Very, very different time.
yeah, it's a completely different place where a lot has changed in that time. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this year goes. But I mean, I guess for a segue, right? As we segue into our movie here, talking about Invasion USA, which is our top movie tonight. I guess Canon's a completely opposite, right? They were ones that flew too close to the sun too much. That they should have stuck with movies like these.
Yeah, they were a bunch of overspenders. Probably made too many movies in one year, unfortunately. They were all kind of similar too, which was not helpful. But hey, you wouldn't have like Death Wish, stuff like that without Canon. So Rambo, Mission in Action, that stuff. So American Ninja, I think they also did, right? So
right, yes, the American Ninja movies, Death Wish movies, Death Wish sequels.
Yeah, so I mean they had success. It's funny watching Canon films because you kind of know the template every time you watch it. Like every film has like a similar beat, and it's just for a different action star. So it's kind of like it's a factory. So it's funny like watching Invasion USA. I had not watched this since I was like 9, maybe 8, 9 years old. No, like forgot a lot of things about it. And I'm watching this and going like, this is very cheesy, but I kind of wish movies like this were still made because the budgets weren't that big, I don't think, and you did a lot with that budget. So it's funny how filmmaking has changed from '85 to 2025 because now I think they've just now focused on the business rather than like just entertaining the audience.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think, according to the trivia on this movie, there was a more story involved with this film. And Cannon came in and said, no, we just want to make it an action. We just want to focus on the action and the Chuck Norris part of it. But you're right. Like there's no way you'd make a movie like this nowadays that's just a straight ahead actioner. Because now action movies need to be like, I know like the most recent Fast and Furious movie, they tried to make it more grounded, but it's not really grounded when you watch it, right? You got like this big massive bomb rolling through Rome, and you've got
Mm,
Dominic Toretto driving down a dam. It's all stuff that's not all that grounded. Yeah, a movie like this that's completely over the top and cartoonish with the action, but yet it doesn't feel like it has like everything has to be like the greatest and grandest or whatever. Yeah, it's just a straight ahead over the top actioner.
yeah, that's all it needs to be. And you understand what's going on. You understand the characters. Um, the violence, the action is pretty awesome. Still, I think.
Right.
It's very over the top, but it's like Chuck Norris doesn't really get shot or anything throughout the whole movie, but it's fun to watch. It's I like to know like what changed from this to now, like how they viewed action movies. Was it the special effects that changed it? Was it just the filmmakers in general? Different studio has producers. Like I like to know like was it that maybe they felt like this wasn't making enough money, so they kind of had to expand on things. Like I like to know like the process of that.
Yeah, because I think it is sort of that thing of like, part of it is like, I always look at 1994 as a big year because that's when like you get these big indie successes, right? Like Pulp Fiction,
Mm,
Clerks, even a
yeah,
Shawshank, and it was almost like the over the top actioner had gone out. You say you get a few more Schwarzenegger movies. I mean, obviously that year he had True Lies, but you get a few more as the decade goes on. But eventually, he's not making anything. Stallone was having trouble at that point, and then of course, Seagal and Van Damme, they go by the end of the 90s, they're completely done with
right.
big screen movies. But at the same time, you had these big adventure movies, right? Like you had like Jurassic Park and those kinds of things. And it was almost like I think Hollywood was like, we don't want to do the action movie to the same degree that we want to do these big adventure things. The funny thing is Fast and Furious, because that one kind of turned into this big adventure franchise from kind of being more of an action kind of thing. They kind of made themselves into that, but that's probably the one franchise that would be closest to like just a straight ahead, lend itself to straight ahead action. And instead, you've got like Dominic Toretto, dealing with like submarines and flying in space and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's strange how that franchise just blew up the way it did because Tokyo Drift wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire.
Right.
And then they took a couple of years off and they made Fast and Furious, which didn't exactly like the box office either, but it was a much better film, I guess, in terms of the mainstream. And then Fast Five comes with The Rock and
Right.
just pretty much transforms everything. And it's just like, okay, well, maybe that was the ingredient they needed. Um, it's like I said, it's weird. Like I just feel like it's entertainment business is so strange to me sometimes. Like, what is a success? You know what I mean? Like, because every year is something different. Like this year is that. This year is a different thing. This year is comic book movies. This year is horror movies. This year is dramas. Musicals. The next year is like it's so strange.
Yeah, and the Fast and Furious one, like you said, is the strangest because it's like the fourth movie when he made the fourth movie, Vin Diesel, he wanted to sign on for a fifth, and Universal was like, no, we're not giving you a fifth movie till we see how this one does.
Right, right.
Because like you said, Tokyo Drift didn't do well. I mean, I liked the second movie, but it didn't do well either. But then
Mm-hmm.
when the fifth movie, like you said, it was supposed to just be like this over the top heist movie. But like you said, The Rock is amazing in it. Like one of my all time favorite lines in a movie is when that Vin Diesel is like trying to rally the troops to go do this, this whole thing to get the money and everything, and nobody's in, and then you hear The Rock off screen just go, "I'll ride with you, Toretto," and it's just like it all just like so perfect. But and that's another one too. When you think about bringing characters from other movies, it's like the way he does that is kind of what we were talking about, where it's like you don't have to have seen Too Fast, Too Furious to get that Tyrese is there, or Ludacris. It's just like, okay, they're there, and okay, then you can find out later. You can check it out later and see where they came from. But yeah, it was like it really was the only movie franchise at that time that came out of its didn't come from something else. It wasn't like an IP from somewhere else that was competing with the Marvel movies and the comic books and some of the other big franchises.
I think in a lot of ways it became almost like a comic book movie. That you brought all these people from other films. That's really like the first Avengers, if you really think about it.
Right.
You bring all these characters together from different movies, and then eventually you bring in the Tokyo Drift characters into the later films. But I gotta say, Vin Diesel did a remarkable job, kind of keeping that franchise afloat until recently. Yeah. It's like even the space one did well. Yeah. I don't know what people want. Maybe people just love cars. I don't know. I also think it's maybe because the cast is very diverse too.
Yes.
So I think it's somebody for everybody. I think that's also why it does so well. I wish more films would kind of do some of that stuff. But I feel like they play it too safe sometimes because they want to make sure they get the right amount of money they need to move on. But yeah, they took a risk on that franchise, and look at what it became.
Right, and like you talk about the diversity of the cast. I mean, that's probably the most diverse cast of anything, and it's like you don't ever hear anybody saying like, "Oh, I don't watch Fast and Furious because it's too woke," right? Like nobody makes that complaint about it. But I think part of that is because I think the diversity feels authentic. It's something where they just the cast is there, and it's a kind of part of it in the sense it's again, as organic as the best way I can describe it, where it's like Vin Diesel's not saying like I'm just picking one of every ethnicity. It's more like, hey, I hang out with everybody. We don't we're inclusive here.
It's family, like it says.
Yeah, exactly, and it just works. And I mean, granted, I don't think I mean, I don't know if Disney, if maybe that's part of the problem, is that maybe like Disney, because I think the other thing about Fast and Furious is I think it's made by people of color as well. Like it's diverse filmmakers that make the Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get that organicness more. Not that because Marvel has diverse filmmakers as well, but it seems like kind of from a production, like a higher level production, it's very much like white males trying to figure out like how to do these things. Whereas Fast and Furious, they just seem to get it. And it is, like you said, it's like kind of the closest thing we have now to an action franchise, because everything else is more along the lines of this sort of over the top adventure kind of thing. I mean, I guess I was trying to think. John Wick, I guess, would be another one that was, but even that one was kind of over the top too. But at least it was close to action.
Yeah. But also that also has a lot of diverse characters in it.
Yeah.
Which helps that. But also people love Keanu Reeves. I think he's just a star, which sells that. But I'll be curious to see how Ballerina does the spinoff, because that's gonna be interesting. But yeah, I think Fast and Furious. I think it works because the characters are relatable. It's not about the message; it's about the characters. And I feel like Marvel is too focused on the message. This is what this movie's about. Like Brave New World is about like politics. It's like the government, and it's like Harrison Ford is almost playing like the line of Trump. What I mean? It's kind of like that. People don't want to watch that. People see that on the news already. So Fast and Furious is just, okay, this is stupid, but the characters are so likable because they're just about each other and protecting each other because they're family and friends. That is easy to watch and digest. That's what, and people can relate to that. Like, my ride or die. You know what I mean? That's my best friend. I have my best friend, my family. I can relate to that kind of stuff. So I understand these characters, and I feel like with superhero movies, They're too focused on, what is this movie about other than the characters?
Right.
What commentary are you trying to tell me?
Yeah, that's a good point too. Is that like you can, there are ways to do that kind of thing. Like for example, like again, I think Black Panther does a really great job of that.
Yeah, yeah,
You see like in Black Panther where it's like it's almost kind of like recently here in the U.S. we just had the draft, right, with all these players
hmm
who's, I guess it's not quite the same as it used to be because players can make money in college now too. You can make millions of dollars in college, but for the most part, these players are getting life changing money, and in some cases they come from very impoverished situations where there's people that are struggling around them, and it's like, well, how many people can I help, right? How can I help everyone? And Black Panther kind of does it on a grander scale where it's like we're this enclave here in Africa that's completely thriving, right? And we've closed ourselves off from the rest of the world. But then there's people struggling around us, and how do we help? Like, what's the way to do it? And so they made the message work even on that kind of that scale. And I think that's part of it, right? It's like if the message seems too obvious, it feels like pandering. Whereas if the message is nicely in the story in a way that feels organic, it'll resonate with people more.
That's again, like you said about the filmmakers, Ryan Coogler, probably an African American filmmaker who kind of is not trying to preach a certain message. He's doing it in a way that everyone can relate to it. Not just black people, but white people, Latino people, Asian people. We all probably felt that way on some level. So, and plus the characters are just very charismatic. Each character feels different than the other one. They all kind of connect, relate, um, and Black Panther's just a cool character. Period. The technology, how advanced they are. That's why that film stuck out. The music was very different from everything else. It was his own vibe. I think that's what these new comic book movies need to be like. They kind of need to be their own vibe. And I feel they all now feel just homogenized with each other. Like if I watch Brave New World, it's the same feeling I get when I watch the Marvels.
Yeah,
Nothing's really different. Different characters, yes. Different message, yes. But the tone I'm getting is the same. I'm not getting anything new out of it. It's like a Shang-Chi, the tone is totally different because it's from a different perspective. So I think that's why that movie was a success. Um, Going back to Vision USA, yeah, it's about the Cold War, but it's done in a very over-the-top way that you can kind of laugh at it and go, yeah, yeah, the Russians are the bad guys, the Americans are the good guys, but it's not pandering to the audience like, this is what's the truth. You know what I mean? Like both sides are kind of like gray in a gray area in Invasion USA.
right.
So
Well, because even the pandering stuff is so over the top. It's like at the very
right,
first scene of the movie, you've got the and just to give people a heads up, we're probably not going to do like a walkthrough like we usually do because this movie almost feels like a bunch of scenes that you could chop up and throw in a blender.
there's a plot, but it's not a very developed plot.
Right, exactly. The basic idea of the plot, because I think most people listening probably seen it, but the basic idea is that Richard Lynch, who plays a Russian named Rostov, and he and
Mm-hmm.
his gang are taking over America, and they're trying to take over America by forming like just causing violent confusion and causing us to attack each other, but at the same time blowing a lot of people up at the same time. And the only person who could save the day is Matt Hunter, former CIA agent who's living in the Everglades, who was going to stay out of it until Lynch decides to try to kill him too. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to go. I'm going to take you down. And that's it. Essentially, he goes from action sequence to action sequence until he finally does take him down.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty much a revenge story. Obviously, they have a history together. Chuck Norris didn't kill him in the past, so he wants revenge. Richard Lynch wants revenge on him. And I love the character because they obviously have a very evil plan. His right hand man's always telling him, "You gotta stick to the plan."
Yeah.
But every time he hears that name, Matt Hunter, or sees him on the TV, he's like, "I gotta kill him. You gotta go kill him." And the guy's like trying to calm him out, like, "Dude, like, chill. Like, let's do this first, and you can kill him." He's like, "No, we gotta kill him now."
Right.
And I like it because it's just a human way to behave.
Mm-hmm.
You've been humiliated, this big tough boss by this one guy who he can never take advantage of, and he wants revenge on him, and it's just a very easy thing to understand as a human being. Like, yeah, if someone bullied me and humiliated me, I would want revenge on him too, in some way. So I just find it really, and you have Chuck Norris's character who's just like chill and doesn't care about anything. He's just hanging out watching TV in hotel rooms
Right.
while shooting people in malls. It's like you kind of understand like why this guy hates this guy so much. Like this guy doesn't give a fuck. Um, so it's like I understand you. Like you're evil, but I kind of understand where you're coming from. So I think that's why this film is just a fun watch because it's like spy versus spy. In a lot of ways, like these two very different characters who kind of very violent characters who just want to like hurt each other, but they do it in different ways.
Yeah, it's amazing because like you said, like I think any other decade this movie comes out, and it's probably like a top 5 action movie for that decade. But the 80s, of course, just had so many good ones that it's hard to put it. But I mean, Chuck Norris, I was trying to think because obviously, there's the missing in action movies, the Delta Force, some of his older ones like Good Guys Wear Black, and some of those that I big fans of. But I feel like this one is my favorite of his, just because, like you said, he just delivers these like very smooth like lines where he's just he doesn't get angry that much. I mean, every once in a while he'll yell, but for the most part he's just like I mean, there's that scene in the hotel room where this guy comes in. He's like questioning this one guy. This guy has like a knife in his hand, and it's like stuck on he's trying to find out how to get to Richard Lynch, and he goes and one of the guys who runs the hotels, like one of the pimps or whatever, goes to try to stop Chuck Norris, and he gets up and he's like, if you come back in, I'm going to hit you with so many rights you'll be begging for a left. But he just says
best line in the movie,
right? Exactly. It's like so great, But he just, it's beautiful stuff, and he plays the hero so well, so much fun that like it just lends into all this over the top action.
Yeah, he's just so cool and like nonchalant about it. Like like whatever. Like I'm bringing my gun, have my shirt open the whole time,
right?
Just so my pecs and my abs. Even when he's like at the end when he's going to the government building, they arrest him.
Right.
He still has his shirt open. I was watching. I started laughing. Like, wow, they didn't even tell him to close his shirt.
Right.
Like he's going to an official building, and he looks like some guy they just picked off the street. Right. So yeah, that's the kind of the character he is, and I think he's great in this. I think it's, a lot of this is where those memes come from with the Chuck Norris jokes.
Right.
I feel like this movie's a big part of that.
Yes.
Because like nothing bad ever happens to this guy.
No. I mean, it is amazing, like how right, like he. Yeah. Yes. When he gets attacked that one time, when they attack his house, his friend dies.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He dives out of his Everglades place, before it blows up, and then he goes back to the mainland where he meets up with the guy who played the older brother on Saturday Night Fever, Father Frank Jr. He's the agent who's like, I want back in or whatever. He's like, we're going to disavow any knowledge of you. But you're right. Like he gets in his big pickup truck, and it's not like his Walker Texas Ranger pickup truck, which is like the kind of the more common like MAGA type truck where it's like a clean like Ford F-450 that's like never seen a job site or anything like that before. This truck has seen some things, right? This truck has been around. It's a big dirty truck, and I mean, he just kind of drives around from place to place and just like beats people up, gets information about where Richard Lynch is. He when he's questioning that guy at the hotel, I have no idea what this guy's telling him. The next thing we know, we're at a mall. They're remaking that scene from The Untouchables, right, where the guy's got the bag with the bomb in it, and he's like, "Oh, here's your bag." And so it's like this couple is in the mall walking around for Christmas because that's one of the funny things about this, right, is that even though the whole planet is the country's being torn apart, right, all these shootings, all this stuff is happening, people still have to go shopping for Christmas, right? You still can't. You gotta go out and buy stuff for Christmas.
That's the '80s consumerism,
right? Exactly. Yes.
Commentary.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter what happens, people still gotta buy their shit.
Exactly. So we're at the mall, and the bag gets dropped, and they're like, "Hey, sir, here's your bag." The funny thing is that guy who dropped the bag, who's like trying to run away, he looks like Sullivan. They call him Cam Sully, who's on our podcast a while back. He does the Jacked Up Review podcast.
Mm.
The guy looks exactly like him. So when he was like driving away, I was like, "Oh, it's Cam Sully. Look at that." So if you're listening, Cam, yeah, you're in Invasion USA. But the movie, I don't know if it came out before he was born. It came out in '85, so it's an older movie. But you see him like walking away, and it's almost kind of like a joke. He's almost like what is the actor's name? The one who played Napoleon Dynamite.
I forgot his name. Yeah. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. He kind of looks like him, like trying to get away from the bag. So
His running is very funny.
Right, exactly. He's like smashing his way through the Santa Claus, the kids sitting on Santa's lap and all that stuff. And finally, the cops start chasing him or whatever, and eventually, right, the bag blows up, but he starts shooting at people, and the bag blows up, and it's like, okay. And then not long after that, Chuck Norris comes smashing through with his truck. And so he's chasing around the mall. And then they get in a Nissan, which again, like kind of think about your messages in this movie, right? You've got the baddies using the Japanese truck. Well, Chuck Norris has the old American standard, he's driving around the mall in. And so you think, okay, that's enough, right? The chasing through the mall, that's plenty. And then when they get outside, the baddie, the guy who was like, the Napoleon Dynamite guy, he grabs a girl in the parking lot. Well, at the same time, like Chuck Norris is being followed around by this reporter who has no impact on the story at all, right? She doesn't do anything, And
I was going to bring her up, yeah.
Right.
But go ahead.
I read in the trivia that he wanted Whoopi Goldberg to play that part, and when he couldn't get her, I guess Joe Subzito, the director, didn't want her. And apparently they had a falling out. They didn't make another movie after that, according to the trivia. I don't know how true that is, or it could be a joke. But like she just gets in the car, and it goes into a chase scene, and they're trying to like grab her from this girl from the other truck as they're driving by. And then once they're able to do that, he throws a grenade. No, he doesn't throw a grenade in there, does he? Is that when he throws the grenade in the?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does.
Okay. Yeah. It's later when he throws the bomb in the
car. Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like, but like the fact that when he's interrogating that guy, he's got the knife in his hand, that leads to the scene in the mall. It doesn't seem like it fits at all, but somehow that's how he gets there.
I kind of understand why it took place there, because obviously that was like the big, gathering space for the 80s was the mall. Yeah, that whole thing is silly, but at the same time, I love the stunts.
Yeah,
in that whole scene and the squibs and all that stuff. Yeah, that whole scene is very well done. I mean, the girl hanging from the truck. I mean, kudos to the stunt woman who did that. Right. Because that was like, wow, that was like 5 minutes of just straight driving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that he just goes around like from place to place, just like disrupting their plans. Right. Like no big deal. I love the one with the bomb with the church.
Yes.
Where he just they put the bomb in front of the church. Like I guess the survivors are gathering there.
Right.
And then Chuck Norris is kind of just like looking out. And then you realize they pressed the detonator to blow up. Right. And you see Chuck Norris above them on the roof. Oh, this is what you needed. And he throws the bomb at them, and they all blow up. Right. It's almost comedic. Right. It's like Looney Tunes kind of. Exactly. Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner kind of thing that's going on.
Right, Roadrunner handing the bomb, or like Bugs Bunny, right? Like Elmer Fudd's trying to blow up, and he's like, "Here's your bomb,"
He puts the barrel of the gun in the hole, and he just twists it around to Elmer Fudd there.
Exactly. Right. It's like the action is amazing, but then there's like this over the top cartoonish element to it that just makes it even more fun. I mean, there's that sequence with the kids on the bus, and it's like this big somber thing of like, okay, kids, you got to go out to the country because it's too dangerous here. Okay. So, he takes them out on the bus, or they all leave on the bus, and they're doing the whole, row your boat, which, what was that? Dirty Harry?
I think it's Dirty Harry. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also think John Candy did it in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles when they were riding the bus back to Chicago. But the kids are doing row your boat, and they're they're going, and then this bad guy just sticks a bomb on the bus. It's like boom, and so Chuck Norris drives by in his big truck. He scoops the bomb off the bus and then goes up to where the bad guys are and he's like, I think you forgot this, and he throws it in the car.
And he just pushes them off the road and then
Right.
it explodes. Yeah, that whole scene is just silly. But I love that scene because there's one little girl inside the bus that looks at the bomb.
Right.
It doesn't say a thing at all. Like,
right.
Some guy put something on the bus. Like,
Right.
you kind of know that you're in danger.
Right.
So, I don't know if she was in shock or I don't know. Bad screenwriting probably, but yeah, that whole scene is kind of funny. I kind of wonder how people will watch this today because obviously the opening of this movie is pretty much like immigration. They're on the boat, the Cubans on the boat trying to get to the U.S. And then you see like Rostov and he has like Latino soldiers too, I guess. They're on another boat that looks like the Coast Guard. And so the people think, oh, we're safe. We're going to go to the United States, and they get shot. All of them get killed for bags of cocaine that was hidden in that boat. So I was watching that going, wow, like how will people react to this now?
Right,
because like immigration or the so-called banana boat that they used to call it. Right. So like it's like it almost felt relevant too, like and it made me feel a certain way, like how would people feel about this if they watched it now?
Right, because it's almost like this weird exception of like if you're escaping communism, because like there's still this idea that communism is bad, which is weird too, right? Because conservatives love Russians, whereas in 1984 conservatives hated Russians, right? But now they love them. Now they love Putin and everybody. But yeah, there's this sense of like, oh well, if they're on the boat escaping communism, that's one thing. Right. But then if for whatever reason, if you're crossing the border from Mexico into America, that's something different. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like why one is considered okay and the other. But like you said, back in the 80s, they actually didn't. You're right. They didn't have the same kind of nicer view of that necessarily. That it was kind of still seen as sort of an illegal immigration kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're painting it right as these people are escaping communism, and they're and then suddenly the bad communists kill them. And that's the other funny thing is that in 1985 in America there was still this sense that there's this big bad communist thing in the Soviet Union that would come and get America. Well, in actual Soviet Union in 1985, they were like barely keeping the lights on. Like the whole thing was falling apart. They weren't planning any invasions. They were barely able to keep everything going.
And also, you have the reporter who kind of like appears every now and then. I don't know why she's in the movie, but the first time we see her, she's kind of taking photos of the boat that got shot. And then I guess the feds are kind of on her, like, "Oh, what did you take? What photos did you take?" And she's kind of complaining about her First Amendment rights. And again, it was kind of like, wow, this is kind of triggering because like that's also a thing that's happening to like First Amendment rights and the news and stuff like that, the media. So that was kind of like that's an interesting kind of take at it. This reporter character, I was watching this, did not remember her at all as a kid. I'm just like, why is she in this movie? She's very annoying. Like Chuck Norris saves her at one point from a gunshot, and she kind of attacks him for it. Like, "Why did you save me? Like, like leave me alone." Like, I'm like the only good thing about her is that she's not a love interest. She does kind of flirt with him, but it never comes to that because Chuck Norris. I don't think maybe he's asexual because he never shows any attention to anybody. But yeah, this character for me is just kind of like one of the worst parts of the movie for me because I just didn't understand why she was here. But she doesn't really add anything to the movie.
No, well, not only does she not add anything, but like for example, in the chase sequence that we were talking about from the mall, she's like yelling at him, like, "Where'd you learn how to drive?" Stuff like that. It's like, how does that help? Like,
like save the girl in the car. What? I gotta save her. Like, girl, like you're part of this now. Save her.
Yes, exactly.
I was getting very annoyed with this woman.
Yeah, but usually the reporter in a movie like that, they uncover something that helps the hero. or that there's like a team up, or like you said, there's like a love interest thing. Maybe this thing with the comedic bent in this movie, it could have been going like kind of a screwball comedy kind of thing. But yeah, it's like, again, it's, the complaint that people that made the movie said was that Cannon went in and edited it, chopped the whole thing up. That Golan and Globus, they chopped the whole thing up and made it into just set action pieces for Chuck Norris. And if that's the case, maybe there was more of a love interest kind of thing. They just cut it out. I don't know. But yeah, it just made for her to be like a character that made no sense. But again, I guess it kind of makes sense in the fact that it doesn't make sense in a movie like this.
I guess, but I just feel like even if it was a love interest thing, like it wouldn't make sense anyway.
Yeah,
because there's like no tension there in terms of like he never looks at her in a way that's like, oh, I like this girl. Yeah. So it's weird. Like maybe they just wanted more female presence in the movie. But I feel like she doesn't really add much to the story. It's but then I wonder if you could take her out, would it change the movie in any way?
Right, it wouldn't. Right, there's nothing that if you cut her scenes out of the movie, other than like probably the one where he saves her, right, when the guy's holding her hostage.
Right.
And I guess the chase
scene, yeah,
you
kind of
need
her,
yeah. Yeah. But you're right. Like she doesn't, she could be gone. I mean, like it's there's other things in the movie that we didn't necessarily need. Like there's I mean, I love the fact that we have a scene with Richard Lynch and Billy Drago, right? Two of like the slimiest bad character actors.
Yeah. This scene. Go ahead.
Right. So like to give people an idea. So once they get the coke from the boat, Richard Lynch has to sell it. So he goes to see Billy Drago with some coke, and I guess the idea is that he gets enough money from Billy Drago that he doesn't need him anymore. So this woman is doing coke, like she's testing it out. She's doing the coke. She's got the straw in her nose, and it's like a nice like metal straw. He smashes her head so the straw goes up her nose, and he shoots Billy Drago in the crotch. He seems to like to shoot people in the crotch for some reason.
Yes.
So he shoots Billy Drago in the crotch, and then he kills her, and then he throws her through the window. That's right. He just throws her through the window. And then he leaves with the bag of cash because he doesn't need the drugs anymore. So the guy who runs like the Fleabag motel that this is all happening in, he runs upstairs. He sees the couple are dead, and he sees all this coke, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to get out of here because this is Miami in the '80s, right? I mean, the whole city was built on coke in the '80s." So he's like, "Oh man," he grabs the coke and walks out. That's it. End scene. I guess that's supposed to be funding their whole operation here, is this drug thing. But I can't imagine there's enough money in that one little bag that Rich takes,
because he had like a whole squad, like a country of soldiers that will just go to every single major city and just blow things up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the other funny thing is, you were talking about earlier about how, Cannon's known for the ninja movies, right? Like the American Ninja films, Enter the Ninja. Well, I had done some research on ninja. Well, I don't say research. I was reading Wikipedia because I take this long bus ride out to Jersey a couple of years ago. And I was reading on Wikipedia about them. And apparently ninjas, the real historical ninjas, they didn't dress in the black outfits that they're known for. They dressed like the enemy soldiers that they were infiltrating. And they would cause dissension. They would look exact. I mean, in other cases, they would sneak into buildings and assassinate people. But that was the big thing, is that they would cause dissension in the ranks by looking, and they were able to mimic the uniforms and everything so well. Yeah. And so in a way, this is like the most accurate depiction of ninjas in this movie, because that's what the baddies do, right? They look like police officers. They look like soldiers, things like that. They infiltrate and cause dissension that way. This is like the most ninja of the canon ninja movies in a way.
Yeah, I like that aspect too, because I thought that was very clever how they did that. I guess the major scene is with I guess this is a club, I think, where all the people are just hanging out.
Yes.
And then the cops just come up and they just shoot the people, and then they leave, and then real cops show up,
right?
And they get upset at them and start throwing things at the car, and these cops leave because they're like, oh, man, we're not gonna deal with this crowd.
Right.
So it's funny because this is also technically a Christmas movie,
right? Yes.
Even though it never really feels like a Christmas movie, but it technically is. Like the scene where they're in that whole the whole suburban area, and they're just shooting rockets at these houses and just blowing them up. And I'm just like, good Lord.
Exactly. Right. And we find out in the trivia that those houses were in an area of Atlanta that was set for demolition. So apparently they were expanding the airport in Atlanta. And I know
Uh,
actually Todd Leibnow was on our show one time, and he was mentioning this, and then I saw the trivia as well. It was like it was a reminder that these houses were all meant to be demolished, so they got the ability to blow. I think they bought like 8 of the houses and blew them up for this. So it's like so it's like a kind of another American element of this movie, that eminent domain, right? People like being displaced because an airport's growing.
mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. Like in New York City, I think that must have happened probably with like LaGuardia and JFK, but I don't know.
I'm sure it has.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that's actually trivia I didn't know.
yeah.
A cool way to do it, a cool way to get rid of the houses.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like I don't like in Boston. That was something. It happened like in the '70s. They were trying to expand the airport. It's in like kind of northeast in Boston, and people were protesting against it. And it kind of actually led to what ended up becoming the Big Dig, because it was they were putting the highway underground underneath the tunnel. But that was a huge thing. They wanted to expand Logan Airport, and people finally were fed up in that community. They were just like, no, you're no more eminent domain, no more taking houses. But you can imagine Georgia probably, right? It takes a little while for those kinds of progressive thinking to make its way down there, and so they were like, "Yeah, no, people's houses are going to go," and those look like pretty nice houses that people got displaced,
Yeah,
and so.
yeah,
But it makes for a fun. I mean, that sequence, like you said, it's like this family is just one of the things I felt like the only reason why I think it takes place at Christmas, I feel like, is that they want to really show that juxtaposition between the godless communists and then you
uh,
know and
okay, yeah,
which, I mean, if America was that much of a Christian country, why didn't we get the day after Easter off or Good Friday off, right? Like it's
right.
like, give us some more days off if we're so Christian and religious. But now we have God in our national anthem, so I guess that's supposed to be enough, right? So it's like we don't need more days off from work like the rest of the world. But I think that was the other part of it. That so it's like almost like a Christmas movie, only to make that juxtaposition.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was strange. It just stuck out like, well, wait a minute, this is Christmas.
Right.
And it's like warm outside. I'm like, the kids are like not even cold.
Right.
Um, but I like that scene because like children are threatened, and that's like a
Right.
very rare thing in action movies these days.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't sure like the kids died or they survived. I think most of them survived, right?
So like the little girl survives, but the
Right.
mom, the parents, and the older brother die.
Right.
Yeah, or like the kid on the boat, right? And the,
Hmm.
he dies. He
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
right. A lot of kids die in that sequence. So yeah, they because there's this idea. I think because this was partly written by Chuck Norris, and then I think it's his
His
brother's.
brother.
Yeah, his
Yeah.
brother also wrote it, and then there's a third writer. So it's like they. I think there was a sense of like these godless communists, because I think, I mean, Chuck Norris is definitely very like, he's definitely a MAGA now, but he's definitely always been a conservative. So he probably was a huge Reaganite too, and was like very like anti-communist, all that. And the other thing too with Golan and Globus, he was because he's devout Christian, but I think he's that devout fundamentalist Christian that like likes aspects of Judaism because of its history, Christianity coming from that history. And so he would like to go to Jerusalem. So the Golan Globus guys, they got along really well. And they would, towards the end, he was just making movies in Jerusalem about like, demons and things like that. That's like, what kind of, but I think that's part of it too, is that I wonder if he would have been okay. He might have had like kind of that Michael Landon thing of like, oh, let's have more kids killed. Let's show how bad these guys are. And, or Stallone's another one who would do that kind of thing. Like, oh, let's show how bad these guys are and kill more kids. And I wonder if Golan Globus was like, no, you killed one on the boat. Like, that's it. No more killing kids.
Right. And that one they actually show.
Right.
Because the one in the house they don't show. It just the house just blows up.
Right. Yeah.
And then the mall scene. Who knows how many kids were killed there?
Right. Yeah.
Because that one kid throws the gum at the car. A very silly scene.
Yes.
But yeah, it's funny because I feel like just the commentary of the Cold War thing, like by this point was almost at its end.
Right.
So it was kind of like we were watching, going like, yeah, I don't think the Soviets were this violent
Right.
against America at this point, but
No, right. they couldn't afford the bullets. They'd lost all their money in Afghanistan. All their weapons were just, it's not like America could have invaded them, but they certainly weren't. Red Dawn, right? That's the other one at that time.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. I remember my friends watching that Red Dawn they hadn't seen it in the '80s, and so I remember watching with them in college, and they were just like, "This people didn't really think this." And I was like, "Yeah, 1984." Because in hindsight, right, we would say, "Well, no." The only reason why the Soviet Union was actually even staying together at that point was that there were more hawkish people in there who were angry at Reagan's tough rhetoric.
Right.
So if Reagan had come in and not been so like, whoa, we're going to kill this evil empire, they probably would have collapsed during his tenure. They would have fallen. And I think they wanted to make sure that I know Reagan did sign some. I think there was like some stuff that happened. I think while Reagan was in office, and then it was more like Bush. Because the other thing too is that East Germany. We forget about that. That East Germany was still around at that time. So there's Germans in this movie, and I think they had to change some of that when they released the movie in Germany because. I think they made Richard Lynch's character an American terrorist because they were trying to make things better between them and East Germany. They didn't want to be like making East Germany matter at them. So
there's certain lines spoken in German in this movie. Which like you said, they may have changed. I don't know like how much of it was changed. But still like the idea of like terrorists coming into the country and pretty much trying to cause this disorder, and then all these government officials go into this one building. They're trying to destroy that one building,
right? So
they could take over the whole country. That's still a frightening thing, right? And nuclear weapons still exist today. Like a lot of it's still kind of relevant. But at the same time, it's kind of like such a different time watching this movie. Like I told you off the air, I got the 4K this past weekend, which I didn't even know existed. But since I was doing the podcast, I bought it, and just watching it like in 4K is like a very different experience because like it looks more modern. Even though the film quality is not the greatest, it's still like very like grainy. The camera is still kind of soft, that kind of Canon look, but in 4K. But it's just a marvel that a film like that even existed back then. And this Chuck Norris being cool as fuck. Like it's like this might be one of my favorite performances of his. To be honest, like he just gets on screen and just shoots people. Like it's just an easy role for him. I just dislike the reporter thing. I did. As of the ending, the trap at the end was very clever. We didn't talk about that yet. So like he's killing all these people, and I guess he goes to a carnival, and I guess the terrorists have destroyed the carnival, and I guess children had died there or whatever, and he realizes like the whole thing is bigger than him. So he tells the FBI guy, like, we need another plan. So they fake his arrest, and he goes on TV and tells Rostov, like, to come get me. I'm going to kill you. And that's what tells him, like, okay, screw this plan. We're going to kill this guy, and then we'll do the plan. And then when he gets there, he realizes it's a trap. Like, no, there's no one there at all. And it's just all wait for him. And I think like some parts of the movie are very well written and very clever, but there's no plot to this movie at all. It's just terrorists invading America and Chuck Norris is here to save the day. Right. That's pretty much it. And lots of guns, lots of rocket launchers, lots of explosions. Like I think this would have won probably the Oscar for best stunt work. To be honest with you, if there was a category for that back then, because the stunts in this movie are very great.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and the explosions. The helicopter explosion is one of my favorites. When he
great.
The helicopter's just sitting there. So usually, for a good helicopter explosion, you want it to be like you want the helicopter to be in the air. This might be my favorite, like helicopter that's on the ground exploding. I can't remember what he says. There's a great line that he gives him when he blows him up too. But he just kind of shows up and just like, that's it, Boy, yeah, that's just, and then like you said, it's like when he goes into the place, and I mean, he's like double fisting Uzis, which is great. Usually it's just one Uzi, but he's double fisting them, spraying everything around. I mean, there's the bad guys in one room. They're kind of like hanging out and they're hiding in this one room, and he just like blows the walls out on either side of them to kill them. And then like Richard Lynch, he's like yelling at Richard Lynch to like chase him. And that's that's a great. I mean, I was trying to think because even before that end sequence, right? There's that sequence where he gets pulled over by what looked like the army, and then
right.
we realize that one guy there who's one of the terrorists is there, and he kind of knows that he's one of the terrorists too. And the guy's like, "And I want your I need your license." And he's like, "You need my license?" And he goes and pretends to be pulling the license, and he sees the guy pull his gun, and then he kind of gets, it's almost like an old Western kind of thing there.
Yeah.
And then he just takes out all of them, right? He just starts shooting them all, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. That scene was almost close to being racist too.
Right, exactly.
Because the guy was Asian.
Right.
He had the accent, so he kind of looked at him, okay, you're not American, I'm gonna shoot you. It was kind of I didn't want to laugh. It was kind of like I kind of chuckled at that. I was like, "This is so '80s."
Right.
And then that's how he finds out about the church bombing.
That's right.
We learn.
Yes. Right, because the one guy doesn't want to. The Asian guy doesn't want to talk. So
right. So he shoots him, and and he talks to the other guy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of instances where it feels very much like an action sketch film. Where it's just like scenes that are kind of glued together to make one cohesive movie. Because it's like we said, there's no like story at all, really. Right. Like we don't know, we know like one part of the background between the Chuck Norris and Richard Lynch, and that's about it. We don't know anything else.
No.
We don't know much about the history. We just know that Richard Lynch was humiliated by Chuck Norris and he wants revenge. That's all we know. Right. And I guess sometimes that's what you need in a movie. It's not complicated. Just add grenades and rocket launchers and guns and knives, and we're fine. Can we talk about Richard Lynch's death in the end of the movie?
Yes, I think that's because it is one of the best baddie deaths. I think. I mean, I would say I was trying to think what ones. I mean, obviously, let off some steam. Bennett in Commando is great. Hans Gruber falling off the building in Die Hard is great. RoboCop. Oh, just another really great one. I mean, even though it's not a death of a baddie, I always love Rocky V when he punches the Don King type guy, and the guy's like, I'm gonna sue, and he goes, sue me for what? I always love that one. But this is up there. This has got to be one of the best. And what's great about it too, right, is it's almost got a Western feel to it. Like we were talking about earlier, only it's rocket launchers instead of guns, right? Instead of like 6-shooters. So I mean, Richard, so Chuck Norris, he's kind of doing this cat and mouse game, right, with Richard Lynch. He's yelling to him, Rostov. He's kind of running around this office building, hiding in different places, and Rostov, he thinks he's got him, right? So he's got his rocket launcher out, and he's walking through, and he hears a click behind him. And it's Chuck Norris opening up his own rocket launcher. And he realized, like, oh, I'm screwed, right? It's like the same as like hearing the gun cock, only it's a rocket launcher, because this movie couldn't end with a shootout, right? It can't be a duel with a shootout. It's got to be a rocket launcher duel. And so Richard Lynch has only one chance, right? He's got to fire his own rocket launcher. So he goes to turn, right? And before he gets a chance to turn, that's it. Chuck Norris gets, which is kind of funny because it's almost the other way around. Usually in movies like that, it's the hero that kind of turns quickly and gets the baddie before they get a chance. But no, Chuck Norris gets him, and we just see a huge explosion out the window. But we're assuming that there's pieces of Richard Lynch flying out that window.
He just explodes into nothing. I saw that. I just started dying laughing. Right. Like it's just like boom, and it's like nothing. Like he just evaporated. And then the movie just ends. It's like the end. Okay.
Right. That's it. There's no walking off into the sunset. There's no, he doesn't meet back up with the reporter. No. There isn't no, that's it. You're right. The credits roll. And it's like the only way this movie could have ended. Any other way that they ended this movie, it wouldn't have been enough, right? If he had just shot him, it wouldn't have been enough. If he's, I mean, because that's the other thing too. I forgot was that he when he's killing the bad guys, he loses his guns and he shoots one guy, but then the other guy almost shoots him and he gets him with a knife. And then Richard
Yeah.
Lynch, so he's killing people in all kinds of ways. So it's almost like there's no other way to kill Richard Lynch that's not just going to be a repeat of the other killings that he did earlier in the movie. It's like a movie this over the top had to do something like that.
Yeah, it's really funny. But yeah, you're right. Like this whole time, like this had to end this way because one of them had to die very viciously, and I don't think you get any more vicious than that. Like it's just like pieces of him just flew, and like Chuck Norris just stares, and that's it. It's over. Movie over. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, there's no, like we said, there's no plot, so that was pretty much the plot.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
You guy won.
like you said, like they don't make movies like this anymore, and I think it's a few reasons, right? Like one is the budget. For the practical effects, it's like you have to be to have this level of practical effects, for a movie like this. I think you have to. It has to be a blockbuster. Nobody would fund it otherwise.
Right.
I think I don't know. This movie doesn't have a ton of names in it, right? I mean, it's got Chuck Norris. He's the one name. Richard Lynch was kind of more of a B. He was a B movie actor who did like a lot of like TV shows at that time. He was like, I think he did an A-Team episode or a Hunter episode or something like that. So it's not like he would have been that expensive. I heard they wanted Steven Berkoff, and he turned it down because I was thinking maybe he would have been doing Beverly Hills Cop at that time, but no, I think he said he turned it down. He didn't like the role. Yeah, it's yeah. I was like saying like I think it's like it. They wouldn't make a movie. You wouldn't make a movie like this anymore, unfortunately, and it's a shame because this, yes, maybe the messages in this movie are bad, but the movie itself is just so much fun.
Yeah, I think that's an issue with Hollywood now. Is I think it's about message.
Yeah,
It has to be about something. So if you make a movie like this now, like I guess they feel like no one's gonna care, or they feel like it's too derivative. Or there's no story, there's no plot. What's the point of making this movie, spending this money? Also, there's not gonna tell the audience something. It's, I guess every filmmaker wants a perspective of how they feel about the world and about life. So I guess, yeah, like you said, like this kind of film feels of its time. Like the 80s were all about this. There's like violence and horror and just people getting revenge on each other for whatever reason. So I guess for that we should appreciate it because it's almost like a time capsule kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I watched it on Tubi, but the fact that there's a 4K available of this as well,
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it's amazing. I wonder because it's Canon MGM. I read in the trivia that other than Gone with the Wind, this was the most rented or the most like sold home video for MGM because MGM bought the rights to all of Canon's stuff. After Canon went, and so other than Gone with the Wind, which to be honest, it blows my mind. Like, I guess people did buy Gone. I mean, I was going to say I don't know if I necessarily bought Gone with the Wind. It was one of those deals where you remember like Columbia House where you pick out movies and you not pay for them or whatever. Yeah. So I was picking out movies on Columbia House. And I was like, well, I probably should have Gone with the Wind. And then I watched it because I hadn't seen it in forever. I saw it when I was really young on this TV show in Boston called The Movie Loft, where they would show movies when they weren't showing Bruins or Red Sox games. And it was a 2-part. It was like a 2-night thing of Gone with the Wind. And I can't remember how old I was. Probably like 8 or 9. But I watched it again. I was like, oh yeah, this didn't age well. And I was like, didn't age well from like whatever it was 15 years since I had last seen it. But I was like, all right, well, I guess I've got it in my collection now. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what supplanted it after 2007 because I don't even know MGM. Like, they don't even make movies anymore. Right? They're owned by Amazon, I think.
Well, I'm still making like James Bond.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, but I think like Amazon, I guess, uses them right to make movies and stuff. Yeah,
James Bond, and they own like the Creed, Rocky stuff now. I think.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, which is another interesting one, right? With Stallone, where he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's kind of out of the loop on that. So yeah, so I guess these canon movies though are like, I guess these were such big home video ones, but out of all of them, you think of like the Death Wish movies and Mission in Action and all the ninja movies and all stuff. But no, it was this movie that was the most popular. And I guess when you think about it, it's because maybe it has more of a broad appeal, right? That like it doesn't have the ninjas that we from the ninja like I said, it had more literal ninjas in this but didn't have actual ninjas in it, so you can kind of relate. There's not like that piece of it that might make it feel like more cartoonish, more kid friendly, but it doesn't have like the Death Wish kind of that, like what was that, was it Michael Winner, was that the guy who directed those?
Yeah.
Yeah, where they're just these dark, like just I mean they're fun, but they're not cartoonish the way this is cartoonish. They're not over the top the way this is over the top. So, I mean, yeah, like a Death Wish, you're going to have an interesting crowd to watch a Death Wish on a Saturday night. Whereas like this, I think you could show this to just about anybody on a Saturday night and they would get a kick out of it.
This is probably just a film that people saw maybe on HBO back in the day,
Yeah.
TV syndication. Um, I mean, the poster is just him shooting guns with his shirt open. I mean,
Right.
who doesn't want to watch a film with Chuck Norris like that? Oh, okay, I'll check that out. That looks like a cool action movie. Um, I mean, I think Chuck Norris period back then was just super popular. Like Texas was a Walker Texas Ranger probably maybe helped with that too. Like, oh, let's go back and watch these Chuck Norris movies.
Yeah.
So who knows? Like that's probably what it was. Like just his popularity was just so. He was also doing like the exercise stuff too, wasn't he?
Right. Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah. So
the Walker thing, I didn't even think of that because that show was on for a while, but it would have, because I think, yeah, we think we forget sometimes, or I forget myself that, like the video store at that time and like the, buying movies and things like that, yeah, people who were into Chuck Norris would be like, oh, what is this Invasion USA thing? And then they watch it like, oh, I got to buy that, and yeah, all the Chuck Norris movies, if you're going to own one, this would be the one to own.
and back then that's like also when like the whole debate about Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris happened too.
Mm-hmm.
Like who could win the fight, and then I guess that's probably what it was. People were just wanting to see Chuck Norris movies and see how popular it was, and that was probably the one they saw the synopsis and went, oh, this is an easy one to kind of sit through. So let's check this out. I mean, the poster itself is freaking cool. So
it is, yeah. I mean, yeah, that alone is going to get you there, and I think, yeah, it makes plenty of sense that people, if the first thing they were going to buy, if they were going to buy a Chuck Norris movie, would have been that. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy. On the one hand, it's crazy to think, but on the other hand, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There was also, it was Avenging Force was the movie that was supposed to be the sequel to this, and he didn't want to play it, so they had Dudikoff play the same character, but there's no connection between the two. They just have the same name. It's it's an interesting, which again, part of that kind of that thing that like nowadays, right, you can't do that, right? If you're going to use the same character, there's got to be some kind of connection between them. Like especially younger people, they're obsessed with canon, which I always joke that I don't know how they handle Hanna-Barbera. Well, they think Hanna-Barbera shows should also have canon, and it's like, yeah, I mean, Hanna-Barbera didn't care. Just like,
well, they didn't care when they changed War Machine, so
right.
why would they care?
Right, exactly.
But
no, that's a great point. Yeah, because poor Terrence Howard, like he he's kind of doing direct to video stuff like that now. But yeah, I mean, it's just like that whole thing took off. I guess he must have seen it coming. They must have known it was going to take off, and because that was Robert Downey Jr. was like getting all of his friends, getting Mickey Rourke and people like that in his movies, and so he must have known. But yeah, unfortunately, and then Don Cheadle took over, and now he's like doing all the movies.
Yeah, but yeah, this film was actually more fun than I expected it to be, because I honestly, like I said, I didn't remember this movie at all, and then I bought the 4K. Let me buy it. Maybe like if it sucks, I guess I'll just spend like $40 on it. Right. But I had a good time watching it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It went by really quickly because it was just people getting shot. Right.
Right. There really isn't. I mean, the slowest thing in the movie, I think, is the opening credits, right? Because he's just like riding around on that
Oh,
like
the
swamp buggy
airboat.
thing.
Yeah, the
Yeah, that
airboat.
boat.
Yeah.
And then he has a scene where he's talking to the guy, the actor's name, Dale Bertie, I think his name is.
Yeah, the airboat. Yeah.
Dale Bertie, yeah, John Eagle, who ends up dying later in the film. But
Hmm.
he talks to him. That's kind of a long scene, and I guess like there's a few scenes where you're just like, okay, yeah, we could kind of move through these things quicker. But for the most part, it's either uh, Richard Lynch getting
Lynch.
angry, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Breaking stuff because he's angry because Hunter, or going out and killing people, right, and leading the baddies to kill people. It's Chuck Norris driving around a pickup truck and beating the crap out of people, which is essentially what Walker Texas Ranger is, right? It's just a cleaner pickup truck.
Hmm.
But then scenes of him talking to Father Frank Jr. from Saturday Night Fever about what their next move is going to be, and then a reporter who just shows up from time to time.
And also you have like the stereotypical Latinos, being pimps and acting like drug dealers, I guess.
Right, right. Because they have the one group that's like you said, they're at the party or at the club or wherever, the cops come and shoot them, and that's almost like that scene is like, oh, we're in Miami, so we've got to have some Latino characters doing it's like if they were shooting it in Brooklyn, they'd have a bunch of Italian characters kind of thing, right? So they'd like,
Right,
oh, we
right.
have to have them doing kind of that's their whatever having a party or whatever. But you're right, it's like I mean, and that is like so much too. It's like when that scene when they're working on their cars and stuff like that, and like the big
Oh,
muscle
yeah.
gun guy, it's like, yeah, I mean, they the only thing they don't have is like nobody has a hairnet, right? They don't go fully like bad stereotypes,
Right, right,
but
right.
it's like bad enough. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, this film is very much 1985.
Yes.
Like you can't make a film like this today and get away with it. Um, which I don't know. Uh, it's funny because I feel like I kind of wish a part of me wishes they still make movies like this, but I understand why they don't. Obviously, it's not very culturally. Um, what's the word I want to use? Like it's very not PC.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like the 80s were a very wild time in terms of life in general. So yeah, I dug this, and it's good to watch a film like this every now and then to remind you like what action films used to be like.
Yeah.
Because now sometimes I feel like every action film now is kind of the same, which is
Right.
unfortunate. Um, I think it's more focused on the star of the movie and then the special effects. And it's always about like the same kind of you have the same kind of character, same kind of plot, same kind of final act. It's sometimes I watch action movies now and go, I feel like I've seen this before.
Yeah.
I
And this
just
is
that's why John Wick to me is like I love it because it's different.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And like you said, this thing, it feels different. I mean, September is going to be the 40th anniversary of this. When you
Crazy.
mentioned the fact that 1985, it's like, yeah, we're coming up on 40 years of this movie, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was trying to think of like how many action movies I would say have come out since this movie that I liked better than it. I probably maybe can name 10. I mean, think about like I was trying to think of a modern action movie. I guess maybe one that comes close is Captain America and Winter Soldier, right? That's kind of like,
That's a great movie. Yeah.
yeah, they said, okay, we're going to make an action movie out of a comic book movie instead of just a big adventure thing. We'll make it an action movie with like some really big chase scenes and big action sequences. But for this kind of this thing with this small budget, I mean, I guess it's kind of big for Canada. One of the things I read was that Joseph Zito, that the director, he got a call from Menachem Golan, and he was worried because usually that meant Golan was going to try to cut the budget, and he was like, he actually gave him an extra $2 million to make it even bigger. And so it's another thing there too. Sometimes with these movies, if you put a little bit more into them, you get more out of them. But yeah, it holds up in a way. It's dated with some of its ideas and
Hmm.
the setting and all of that. But on the other hand, using rocket launchers to blow up a bunch of shit just always works, right? So in a way, and a cool hero.
it feels like a video game in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Like a Grand Theft Auto kind of kind of vibe to it. Cars and the rocket launchers and guns and
Right.
the drug dealing
Yeah.
and the terrorism sometimes. Um, I mean, yeah, you're right. I guess it's $12 million the budget was,
Right.
which
And
is I guess that's all for the explosions. I'm guessing because like I guess Chuck Norris got like 2 million or something like that, and the rest of it probably was like the stunts.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And like like I said, like they bought those 8 houses that they blew up. So I didn't realize that that was how that worked. Was that those houses they were going to be demolished, but they bought the ability. Like, according to I think to one of the trivia things, it said they bought those houses so they could blow them up. And so or I don't know, or they just got permission. I'm not sure exactly how
Well,
it worked.
it's smart either way because you don't have to build a set for that.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, it saves you money there. You don't have to worry about what's going on. I mean, one of the things you notice, right, is they don't film inside any of the houses, right? They kind of film everything
Right.
from outside of them
Hmm.
and just blow up the neighborhood. But yeah, they do such a great job with that. The other thing too is back then I don't think you needed to make 3 times your budget because advertising wasn't as expensive, and so
Correct.
plus there was a
Correct.
better, the home video market was just starting to become a thing at that
Hmm.
time. Now, and then of course this movie ends up making a lot of money for Canon or for MGM on the secondary market, and
Right.
to your point, it's still making that kind of money that Vinegar Syndrome puts out a 4K, and so it's still hold. I mean, it still has that kind of that kind of value that that it still has that kind of popularity that people are picking up the 4K that the Vinegar Syndrome will make a 4K of it, that it's still that big of a deal. So it despite the fact that it's a product of its time, it also really endures.
Yeah, like you say, you saw it on Tubi, which that alone probably got a lot of people watching it because it's free, and with the ads, the ads are making money from the ads too.
Right.
So yeah, like this was a very, I guess, smart investment. Um, Even though this was like near the end of the Canon studio, but the fact that that studio had made as much as it did,
Right.
because let's be honest, a lot of it was exploitation and schlock,
Yes.
but there's an audience for that, and I think like we're talking about the Marvel movie. I feel like it just got to a point where it just got tired. You know what I mean? And people were just looking for something else. But yeah, I always enjoy going back to Canon because Canon it always puts a smile on my face just to see these weird movies um, that were made by that studio, and eventually they were get screwed by like Masters of the Universe and stuff like that. Um, but it's yeah, it's a great time. I guess what I can say, it's a great time. Much better than I remember it being because like I said, I didn't remember anything about this movie at all except for the mall scene and the house getting blown up. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. It made me actually want to go watch more Chuck Norris movies. To be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, same. And there are more on, especially a lot of his
Yeah,
canon stuff is on Tubi.
Misty in Action and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one I remember as a kid was Good Guys Wear Black. It was that same channel,
Mm,
Channel 38 with the movie loft. They were showing it,
yeah.
and I was like, "This is amazing." I think there's a scene where there's a guy. I haven't seen that one in forever, probably since then, actually, possibly, where like he jump kicks a guy in through his car window. It was that kind of thing. But when you watch that, was it Electric Boogaloo, the Canon
Yeah.
documentary?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
that one of the script readers for them, David Delval, he has a really good Instagram because he does a lot of old like horror and stuff like that on his Instagram. So yeah, I think it's called Delval Archives for people people listening. It's worth checking out. But he's in the movie because he talked about being a script reader for them, and he said he had like two piles. He had the Charles Bronson pile and the Chuck Norris pile. So when a script came in, he would throw it in one or the other directions. I mean, in this case, it was Chuck Norris's script. This was something he developed. Though maybe it came through the original writer. It's possible the original writer, who has both a written by and a screenplay by credit. Maybe let me see if I can get his name here. It's so I'm scrolling on Instagram on IMDb while we're talking, so that's never a good thing. But James Bruner was his name, James Bruner. So the he was the story by with Aaron Norris, and then he's the script by with Chuck Norris. I wonder if it was just James Bruner's script, and then Aaron Norris played with it to make the story, and Chuck played with it for the script part of it. And maybe that's kind of how it worked, was that the screenplay came in and okay, this looks like a Chuck Norris script. He looked at it and said, okay, well, I want to do some new things with it.
Right.
And this is the movie, but it all works, right? So like whatever James Bruner's script was, it can't have been as good as this.
No, I'm sure they tailored it to Chuck Norris specifically. The fact that he doesn't get like a guy attacking him at all in the movie, it just tells me right there, like, he had that clause. No one could beat me up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he had that Dwayne Johnson clause.
Yeah, I mean, because like you said, the only time he even gets caught is when he gets arrested. He's doing it on purpose, right? He's watching. What was it? What was it was like Attack of the Flying Saucers, I think, or Invasion of the Flying Saucers.
Earth versus the Flying Saucers.
Earth versus the Flying. That's right. Yeah. So he's watching that on an old TV set in a junky motel. He puts his gum out on the picture behind him, and he's just laying in bed laughing at this movie, waiting for the And of course, like you get the that bad that character actor who plays bad sheriffs in movies and things like that. He's like, we're bringing you in, and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, bring me in. That's fine. I'm ready to, that's like the only thing that right. It's the only kind of, I guess, time where he potentially loses is when he's letting himself get beat. So yeah, I mean, we see that with Seagal in movies later, when we're like, get over yourself. We don't. It's like whatever. But here it works, right? Because Chuck Norris is just like the whole character is so badass that you kind of just go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it has a certain tone that it maintains throughout. So
yeah,
it's easy to digest. But I feel like every character after this, he played the same character. It never changed.
Right. Yeah, this character just works so well that he's like, I'm just going to be, when I'm Cordell Walker, and it's funny. One of the things when he is driving past the detour, where the roadblock is there, when he's turning around there's a military roadblock and he has to turn around. The street is Walker Street. So I wonder if that was his inspiration to be Walker, Texas Ranger. It's like, Walker, huh? I like that. I'll have to use that sometime. That's a good name. So. Because you're right, that character is kind of similar to this, right? He doesn't get angry that much. He just kind of says things in a smooth way. And, I remember the movie Sidekicks. I never actually saw it, but I remember the commercial for it where Joe Piscopo's like, I want to know just how good you are. And he's like, well, pay attention because you're only going to see it once. It's like, it's just, always the great one-liners. I mean, this is it. This, like you said, I think this is probably his best. This is, he wants to be known for Walker, Texas Ranger. I think that's probably his character that he's, but Matt Hunter, it doesn't get much better than Matt Hunter.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Freddie, we're wrapping up here. Anything else on this movie that we didn't cover? Because I know we didn't kind of do more of a walkthrough like we usually do. I
think that was it. Because like you said, like it feels like multiple scenes connecting into one movie. I feel like there was nothing really much to add other than that. I feel like what we explained is pretty much what you should get in this movie. It's just a simple revenge terrorism plot kind of movie where the good guy takes out the bad guy. Right. A whole army of them, by the way. Like this guy has like a squad, and they're all getting killed by one guy. So. Yeah, that's what you need to know. If that's your bag, then definitely check this out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it again, free on Tubi. I think Roku channel has it. But then, like you mentioned, there's the 4K of Vinegar Syndrome out there. So if you haven't, if you want to own a copy of it, that's a great way to go. The Blu-ray
has a lot of special features too. So.
Oh yes, that's
documentaries and stuff like that.
Oh, see, that's sweet. Yeah, so then you get a lot more backstory on kind of how this thing was made.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, as we're wrapping up, Freddie, anything you wanted to plug?
Nothing major. Just my blog, FilmReviews.net. That's still going. Hopefully, I haven't really reviewed anything in a long time. Other than that, nothing else is going on.
Excellent. Well, hey, this is always a fun time. This movie, I think, was a really good, fun conversation. So thank you for coming on.
generation.